Okay, welcome everyone. This is the State Building Code Council BRFW committee for Friday, March 14th. Our chair, Roger Haringa, is gone. He asked me to pro tem unless there's objection from the committee members. Happy to nominate someone else. Okay. Hearing none, then so today we have some important hearings on proposals, but a couple other items. So let's start with the roll call, please.
Roger Haringa is absent. Todd Bayreuther.
Here.
Ann Young.
Here.
Angela Hott. And Katie
Here.
Sheehan. Oh, sorry. Okay. And Katie Sheehan.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. And then would anyone from the public like to be recognized? Hi, Patrick.
Hi, this is Patrick Hanks with the Building Industry Association of Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken?
And Ken Brulette representing the Seattle Fire Department.
Okay, welcome, Ken. Okay, seeing no other hands. We'll go into review and approve the agenda. Can we hear a motion to approve, please?
Motion to approve minutes from February 14th.
I think we're on the agenda first, Dan.
All right, sorry, agenda. Sorry, approve the agenda. Sorry.
Thank you. The second?
I'll second.
I think that's Angela. I
It
see
was me. It was Katie, but
Oh, Katie. Hi, Katie. Thank you. I see a hand up. I guess is there a question on the agenda? We can entertain that. Kane?
Sorry, I'm slow to this. I thought I'd introduce myself. Kane Fenner with Zaxi. I'm a multifamily builder in Kitsap.
Perfect. Welcome. Okay, any other discussion on the agenda? I'll just make a note for anyone tuning in. If you remember the proposals, the petitions, these are all of them that were flagged by this committee and or the tags for further public process, except the embodied carbon amendment, which is being considered next month's BRFW, so 1 month from today. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I
And any opposed? The agenda is approved. Item 3 is review and approve the minutes for February 14th. Can we hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve minutes from February 14th.
Thank you, Dan.
I'll second again. This is Katie.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, they're on the screen. Any proposed edits? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Okay, agenda item 4 is, I assume public. Oh, we didn't have a opportunity for anyone.
We did not add those ones to there. So with discussion with Krista and the tradition of the council of the past, they have typically kept that public comments not on the agenda for the council. And so I've been putting it on there on all of our agendas, and to save a little bit of time, I've removed it from this agenda.
Okay, well, if someone came with expectation and really wanted to, let's we'll put that under other business then. Okay, thank you for that, Dustin. Then jumping into agenda item 4, Dustin, do you want to introduce this one first, or is this?
Yeah, this one I think is a pretty easy topic. So we had 2 proposals, GP1 number 114, which had revision 3, which is the one pushed forward by the TAG and the BFRW committee to the council. And then we also had GP 1038 revision 1. Both of these proposals are for IBC section 504.4.1, which is for stair enclosure pressurization increases. The 038 was a proposal that was kept alive by the TAG for the event that number 114 didn't go through. So let me pull up both of them, and it'll be illustrated better than me trying to describe it here. So let me get my screen share updated.
And Dustin, while you're doing that, maybe the committee can just talk for a second here. So we have both public comment, that was the intent to have input here. It's up to the committee on what action to take, or if to take action today. I mean, ultimately, we want to make a recommendation to the council, of course, but whether it happens now or we want to defer till next time is up to the committee.
Okay. So getting down into the content of this one, we have just the section 504.4.1 in number 038. And then in number 114, we have the same section. And the most current revision was done to kind of align with the content of 038. These were kind of combined. But then there's additional sections in here and a little bit more modifications through here. I guess I'm not seeing the modifications on this document, but it's my understanding and recollection that the 114 had a little bit more going on with it. I guess adding these exceptions down here for that one, and it's just a little bit more content and change as compared to 038. And we kept them both alive so that if the one on the right didn't pass, the one on the left still had an opportunity to pass. And so I believe the task here today is to recommend one or the other for inclusion in the CR 102.
Okay. Any other questions to set this up from the committee before we start taking public comment? Okay. Would anyone like to comment on these two petitions? Okay, we'll keep it open, but then let's get right into then discussion. Are we all catching up? Go ahead, Ken.
All right,
Someone needs to lead. Thank you,
I'll
Ken.
get it started. All right, so I'm looking into, and I wish Eric was on the call. So I'm looking into the proposal, and it talks about that the state of Washington is using the 2023 NEC, and it says options C and J are no longer available standby power options. But then it says option C has changed from storage battery to supply duration, which is true. I'm looking at it right now. I guess my question is, did the state amend the 2023 NEC and remove C? That's what I'm trying to, I don't know. That's what I'm asking. Did we amend somehow NFPA 70 and get rid of option C that's listed?
When you say the we, I assume you mean L&I.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. We mean the state.
I do not know the answer to that question, so I am digging it up right now.
And Ken, when you say Eric, can you remind us, do we need to scroll up just to remind everyone who the
Oh, no, I
proponent-
thought this was, I'm sorry, I thought this was Eric's proposal.
I guess
it would
the one on
be,
the right is, right?
yeah.
And then Richard Williams out of Wabo for the first one.
Where the heck's Micah? I'm gonna see if I can reach Micah. Hold on.
He said he had a meeting that might conflict when I talked to him yesterday, but he's going to try to come. And if we need to on this, if we didn't get a hold of Eric or Richard, I mean, that would obviously be valuable input just to remind everyone at this level. And that's an okay answer today. We also can just set this aside and come back to it if needed today.
That might be best since I don't have the answer to the NFPA 70 question, and I'm not well versed in navigating the L&I rules setting.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll do it again. We'll get prepared. Do we need to officially table it, even if we want to come back to it this meeting? I need to refresh myself on Robert's rules, or can we just simply move on to the next agenda item and come back to it?
I think we should officially table it, for potentially later on the meeting.
Okay.
And,
Anyone want to make that motion?
So a motion to table this to later in the meeting or next meeting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll second. This is
Okay.
Katie.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, so moving to seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So these two petitions will be tabled. So we'll go on to agenda item 5 then to the next one. And it might be helpful if we can surprise Eric and Richard and remind them, maybe we didn't reach out to him.
So I believe, Eric is the, proponent on this one as well. He did reach out and ask about, submitting any sort of revision to this one. And, I told him if he wanted to bring something to it, we can't necessarily, bring that in just at the moment, but, this one was flagged for additional work, from the public, and there's, some detection devices that I believe are needed in, the systems here, and Eric was going to address that, with some new proposal work, but, he's not here today to discuss what the changes, might need to be on this one. And
Okay,
so
but this is a request from Eric to or the
This
other.
this was identified by the group as needing additional public work. And so, at our last, technical advisory group meeting where this one was talked about, Eric, spoke up about the need for some additional, revisions in this. And, I'd have to dig in a little deeper to characterize exactly what those are. I, was under the impression that we would expect Eric here today.
Okay, more than just correlation, you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Well, if that, I guess we'll give an opportunity though, since it's on the agenda. Would anyone else like to speak to it? I do remember this, so, but if the action was, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I would like to talk about this. I mean, if we have to reschedule for Eric, that's fine. It's just the IBC and the IMC, they have already rules for activating ceiling radiation dampers, which is a fire damper, or the static dampers rather, which is a fire damper or a ceiling radiation damper. And under the actuation section for those, it talks about meeting the thresholds for activating the static dampers. And this is adding a bunch of smoke detection to activate it like it was a smoke damper, which it's not. You're concerned about the migration of the radiative energy into an interstitial space as opposed to migration of smoke. And this is going to add a whole bunch of smoke detection that otherwise isn't required. And so if we're going to have an additional table with additional ways to activate or requirements to activate static dampers, I feel that there should be an additional exception or activation for water flow switch, because that will at least reduce the need to have to add otherwise unnecessary smoke detection. And sprinklers are often an exception to having to add smoke detection in other parts of the code. So, thanks.
You're muted, Todd.
It's too bad because it was really important what I just said. Thanks, Patrick. I do remember the deep discussion on this, and I guess well, let's go to Ken, but I guess the discussion today would be what proposed amendments does the council need to consider as we move this up? Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, I kind of agree with Chris that the code already stipulates fire damper actuation, and it's pretty much just done by a heat responsive device. I don't see where we should be looking at adding any type of control to these static dampers already, because they already have the fusible link. They're supposed to just make sure that the HVAC system gets shut down, but these devices supposed to be the ones that are shutting down the HVAC. The HVAC system is supposed to be shut down by other smoke detectors that are installed elsewhere. So I don't see why we have to connect these two. I thought the code is pretty clear, so that's why I was hoping can try to figure out what examples are we talking about, since these dampers again are only supposed to close under heat, unless they're having some problems with the HVAC system, which I don't understand. If they're supposed, the HVAC system's already going to be shut down elsewhere by another device. So trying to figure out what the problem is we're trying to fix.
Okay. So I think for everyone, our goal here is, are there any proposed amendments to this? I mean, technically, yes, we can still, at the committee level, choose to deny this. Although my understanding of where we are is that the TAG recommended to move this forward with additional public work. So that would imply to me that if someone has amendments, we should put them in actual writing and be able to review them as a committee. So if we're not ready today, that's okay. If we think there is action that can be taken in the next 4 weeks, that we can review actual code language or get the proponent here. I guess that's what I would recommend. But what does the committee think? Or is someone proposing to actually deny this petition still? Okay. Well, hearing no recommendations here. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'd say, is a proposed amendment something that the public can do, or does that have to come from the council?
No, you can, if you have actual language you'd like to submit here, I think the intent was that this is the opportunity to to amend it and then have this public process discussion and have the committee consider it and make a final recommendation to the council. So when the tags recommend the petitions, obviously that's heavy on the amendments that are proposed by the proponent. The tag has the ability, of course, to do work on it. But when it passed through the committee the first time, it was actually putting the recommendations forward to the council for the council to decide where and if additional work could be done. That could have been done at the council, but they referred it back to this committee for us to do the work. So this is doing the work, and if someone has extra language, then it would be great to propose it. And if we're not ready to, that's fine. Let's say we want 4 more weeks and look at it next time.
Okay. So is that something we can email to Dustin then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that the best pathway, Dustin, if you want to receive comments?
Or go to the SBCC at wa.gov or at des.wa.gov email address, just in case it gets missed by me. That site's also or that address is also handled by the admin staff here, and so more eyes on that email box. Just fine.
And it might be great to copy Roger Haringa as the chair of this committee.
Okay. Is Roger's email, this would just be Roger Haringa at the des.wa.gov?
I wish that was the case, but no.
I'll reach out to Dustin and figure it out then. Thank you.
And then we'll reach out to Eric also. Okay, anything else on this? Otherwise, I think.
Well, I think,
go ahead, Dan.
real quick, Todd. I'm along with Ken and Chris on this, that, fire dampers have specific things that shut them down, and then adding the smoke detection, it seems unnecessary to me too. But I would like to have the opportunity to have, the proponent, Eric, talk to us, explain what we have before we make a decision.
Okay.
So, I guess my recommendation, or if you want to, me to propose it or whatever to vote on, it would be to, once again, table this till our next meeting to make sure that the proponent was available to talk about it.
Okay. I think it's completely appropriate. We're trying to move things forward, but we're not in a hurry. Frankly, we have till June or July before this CR 102 officially gets submitted. So.
Okay. So that'd be my motion, is to table this until the next time so we can hear from the proponent.
Okay. So a second?
I would second that.
Thank you, Katie. So it's been moved in second. Any other discussion to table?
I would
All
just
those, oh, go ahead.
public to also send in any modifications they have. That way we can have them for that meeting.
Yeah.
And I'd like to get them at least a week before the meeting so that we have plenty of time to intake them and publish them for the meeting.
Yep, post them and look on the screen. I agree. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, this petition is tabled. What's the next one? Are we on to the E EV?
I don't think that we've got the NFPA 130
right.
proposal here that we were saying needed some additional work, and I'm not seeing the proponents of that proposal in the room.
Go ahead, Ken. Let's bring it up anyway, and then let's so we can have
Yeah.
public input.
So this is what happened is that Mark Murray, Sound Transit, proposed in the IBC, the 066, and it got approved through revision 1. The problem was is when we were reviewing it, I brought up the fact that we have chapter 49 in the fire code, and they're supposed to correlate between 35. You have IBC chapter 35 and IFC chapter 49 that deals with the NFPA 130 amendments. So after the meeting that we had way back when, what has been provided today to you is all of the items that are in the fire code, our current WACs, that need to get updated to correlate with what Mark's proposal was for 35. So there was no proposed changes that I'm trying to make. I'm just trying to correlate the language with Mark's proposal into the fire code. So when you look at both documents, they match up. So I tried to highlight in yellow on the document and, of all the things that need to get changed in the WAC to match up. So what I was hoping for is that this committee could probably attach this to Mark's proposal, so it would be shown that it's changing the IBC and the IFC, because he only showed that he was only going after, I'm sorry, I said chapter, it's IBC 3116. And then IBC 35 was the reference standards that he was updating, but it's to correlate 3116 with 4901 of the fire code. If that makes sense.
It does, and thank you, Ken. Ken, is it your recommendation that we allow any public comment on this today, and then move this to the correlation committee to?
That's what I'm thinking too, is that just making sure everybody understands this is what that is. We're just correlating the building and fire codes.
And then, and just to recap for everyone, the action that was taken to refer these down a month or two ago at the full council level had two other actions in it. Refer these down, create a correlation committee, and then activate or initiate, whatever word we want to use, the work group for economic impact. So those three things have to happen before we reach the finish line this year on all these proposals. So I think that makes sense, Ken, and we'll just open it up for any other public comment, if that's okay. Okay. Not seeing any hands. Any other discussion by the committee, or do we want to make that motion? And so I think we're looking for a motion to Ken, you submitted this, correct? You said?
Well, no, I wasn't the submitter. I just submitted this to Dustin to say, hey, these are the changes.
Correct.
Yeah. So yes,
I know you're not the proponent. You're saying
not the
that you
proponent.
submitted correlation.
Yep, I did.
Yeah,
I did. So I would just say the motion would be to add the WAC 51-54-4900 to this petition that would show that the changes are being done in both codes.
Okay. And then we're referring those to the correlation committee.
Yes.
Okay. We hear a motion for that?
I'll move that.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to add these correlation comments to the original petition and refer it to the correlation committee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Ken. Good work. And I don't remember the schedule or if we have a schedule for the correlation committee, but we'll need to start that pretty soon. So
Yes.
okay. Now maybe we can take a peek at the agenda if that's easy, Dustin, please.
Yes. That is, we're on to the EV charging proposals, all three of those.
Okay. And this is our last item for the day, and as we anticipated, then we'll so again, the goal today is we're gonna quickly review all of them. If the proponents want to speak to them and kind of high level, I think we're all pretty familiar with these at this point, but everyone has the opportunity to, as proponents and public, to speak on this today, and then I think the end goal, in my opinion at least, is that the committee makes a firm recommendation and doesn't pass all three of them up to the council, but tries to bring these together somehow. And whether that happens today or in the future, we can establish that. Okay, we're going to introduce them, but Quentin, if you'd like to say something first before.
Yeah, just really quickly. I see Micah just popped on, so if you guys after this want to go back to the stair pressurization, maybe he could help answer some of the questions.
Okay. Do we want to go through these first, committee, and then circle back on that if we have time? Seems to make sense. Okay, let's do that. So Dustin, would you like to kind of high level introduce these, and then we'll let proponents also speak to them if?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
hey, Justin, I just want to say I'm on. This is Hoyt. So.
thank you, Hoyt. So we have three proposals that address EV charging infrastructure in the International Building Code. We have
Hey, Dustin, I think we're seeing a calendar as opposed to.
Oh yeah, I don't have anything pulled up. I was just talking about it. So
Oh, okay.
we start here. I'll put the agenda back up so we can see what I'm kind of talking about, and then I'll start opening stuff up as we need to get into them.
Okay,
But
thank you.
to the high level, we have the three proposals in the IBC for EV charging infrastructure. We have 068, 122, and 135. Both of them affect the amount of EV charging in the table for section 429 in the IBC. And 068 reduces some of the requirements, and both 122 and 135 seek to increase some of those requirements. And so the conversation that's been had so far is that as currently drafted, the tables in the IBC have been interpreted to exceed the requirements set forth in the legislation. And so the proposal 068 to reduce EV charging requirements wouldn't put us below the legislative required threshold. And then the increase there is the proposals are there to bring additional infrastructure in anticipation of increased usage in the future. And so all three of them were moved to the committee and to the council as being technically accurate as far as code language goes. And the actual change that we're looking at here today is one of policy, where we are trying to comply with legislation and keep that stuff there, but we're also trying to not disenfranchise construction projects with high cost and unnecessary requirements. So with that, I'll pull open all three of them and we can kind of look at the tables side by side. It may get a little busy. So Chair, would you like me to do one at a time, or pop them open so we can look at them side by side?
I think it's important to see, kind of glance at each one, right? Know that we're talking about similar changes to the same table for the most part. There's other things, but so that everyone understands the context, and so we're clearly going into a discussion on whether there's no action, right? That's one option, is all three petitions are denied. The other action could be one of the petitions is chosen, or I suppose a third could be there's a hybrid solution here. So again, we've accepted the petition. In my opinion, the council has been petitioned to do this and accepted this. So now we're into the actual, into the nuts and bolts of of what are the appropriate numbers if they need to be changed.
All right. So looking at the top left, this is number 068, the proposal that seeks to reduce EV charging requirements. I'm going to add some highlighting here to show the where the change lies in the table. Not red. There we go. So we have the change there in the table to go from 25% to 15% for group R occupancies. In the one that's here on the left on the bottom, this is number 122. And the space is highlighted there. Let me see if I can get the whole table on there for you guys. There we go. And then on the far right, fill in the half screen is number 135. And this one, so the two on the left affect the same square in the table, and the one on the right is talking about the number of EV capable parking spaces. So different tack there. And so we have the reduction, we have an increase, and we have an increase over here.
Okay. Now, does any of the committee members that haven't been involved with like the IBC tag, for example, need a refresher on the three categories? The required number of chargers, the EV ready, and EV capable. Maybe we can just briefly touch on those definitions, if you don't mind.
So you're talking about the columns there, what
Yeah,
EV
just
station
high
versus-
level, make sure everybody's up to speed. We don't need to start from zero, but just kind of make sure everybody's.
Gotcha. So the first column, or I guess the second column, which is the first section of data, the number of EV charging stations, we're talking about the number of fully functioning charging infrastructure stations there. So that's a parking space that has a system installed. You can pull up to it and you can charge your vehicle. The number of EV ready spaces is the number of spaces that have conductors run to there. So the implication is that you, if you want to develop the EV charging for that space, you come through, you drop a charging unit onto the conductors, and you are now ready to use that parking space for EV charging. And the EV capable parking spaces, I do believe it is just conduits run out there to the parking spaces so that you don't have to do any digging or destructive modifications to a parking area to bring in the conductors and the charging device for there to create the EV space.
And you can see the language below the table on the lower right there. 429.2.1 and 429.2.2. So, okay. Thank you, Dustin. Okay, let's start. Now again, we went into great depth in the tag. So this is a public meeting. We can approach this however you want. I don't think we need to, fully go into, I trust everybody is up to speed on this and has read the petitions. But let's get into public comment and start talking about, especially the comparison between the three so that we can help inform and start to, advise the council on how to make a decision. So I see Hoyt first and then Patrick, please.
Yeah, the one thing I'd like to mention, as I'm sure all of you have noticed in my years, a few years ago, you saw very little electrical vehicles, vehicles out there. Now, I pretty much every time you drive on the freeway, I'm always seeing one at least. So to me, at one of the one I think for looking in the future and as a coach takes a while to change, probably the one that makes the most sense to me is the capable parking one, where you increase that number of capable, because there's no doubt about it that we're going to be getting more and more electrical vehicles. They're becoming much more cost effective in the long run. And it makes sense to look in the future that these things are going to be coming. And I just wanted to mention that. It does make sense to me. It makes sense to do that for the number of you. And I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Hoyt Jeter, the principal engineer in the city of Tacoma.
Thank you, Hoyt. And in general, I appreciate all these comments, especially as they relate to try to ground this in what's the authority of the council, and then what should be the role of the council, in these kind of decisions, as we and what kind of data should be used to support that. If there is not a firm legislative mandate specifically about this topic. I mean, obviously there are legislative mandates in state law on other, broader topics of targets that we have to go after, but specifically on technical issues like this, what should be the role? So, okay, thank you, Heidi. Anything else? Okay, Patrick, please.
Thank you. Again, for the record, this is Patrick Hanks with the Building Industry Association of Washington. We're one of the proponents of these proposals. I want to start off, I disagree with Todd's assessment a little bit of what the TAG voted for. I went back and reviewed the December 17th meeting, and the TAG explicitly voted to move all of these proposals forward in the rulemaking process for public comment, which the discussion at that meeting was to have these as options on the CR 102, that the public would get proper public notice, provide comment, and then have the council make a decision later this year. The reason why that I submitted this proposal was that the law requires 10% EV capable, and then it asks that the code exceed that. And in 2021, we really exceeded that by a great margin. And we're in the middle of a housing crisis. We have lots of constraints on housing supply. And my position is that we need to try to do everything we can to reasonably try to reduce construction costs, reduce risk for builders so that we can increase supply and try to alleviate the housing crisis. While EV adoption rates are going up, in 2024, the state recently released all numbers for the year, and EV adoption was only at 4.44% of the entire passenger vehicle fleet. Now, obviously, those rates are a little bit higher for King, Snohomish, Pierce County, but most counties in the state have under 10,000 electric vehicles. Many counties have under 1,000. So this is a statewide minimum requirement, and to me, it didn't make sense to require so much EV charging infrastructure in counties where they just don't have the demand for that right now. And then when I crunch the numbers, because each one of these categories has to be calculated separately. So you don't just combine it all together and then that's the number of parking spaces that have EV charging infrastructure. You calculate the 10% for charging stations, then round up. You calculate the 25% for EV ready, and then you round up, and then you calculate the EV capable, and you round up there. So the effect is you can have a disproportionate number of spaces than what you would assume compared to the number of dwelling units. If the council adopts our proposal, which will still exceed the law by a great margin, I calculate that it would on average give people about 2 to 5 nights per week for each dwelling unit of dedicated charging, because it's a shared resource. That's for a minimum requirement, even assuming that we get to 100% EV adoption rate within the life cycle of these buildings. I think that's plenty sufficient for a minimum requirement. Whereas the other proposals would drastically increase this in a way that I don't think makes economic sense now, let alone when we reach 100%, if we reach 100% EV adoption rate. But I appreciate that the committee is trying to look more into this, but I think that what the TAG voted for was clear. And with all due respect, even though I disagree with the other proposals, I think the TAG voted rightfully to move these forward to the CR 102 process, get full public comment. And if the committee wants to do more economic analysis or number crunching, that's fine. But let this go out to full public comment and then have the council make a decision this fall. I'm happy to answer any questions if committee members have them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And I do want to just touch on that because you made the same comments in the TAG and at the council level. That absolutely is a possibility. We passed this up deliberately to the council, and the council could have chosen at the previous meeting to take all three and forward them and direct the staff to file those for CR 102. That's not the action that was taken. The action was bring it back down to the committee. And so now it's on the committee. I've given my recommendation of what I think should happen, that the committee should make a firm recommendation to the council, but the committee can decide to do to push all three of them back up and say, hey, council, we've reviewed them again. We've considered economic impacts. We've considered any correlation issues, and we think this should be filed in CR 102. That's absolutely an option. But the basis for my recommendation is in more of a question to everyone here. What is the appropriate forum to have enough of a technical discussion? There was technical discussion at the TAG, but the TAG moved forward and said, yes, these all three have technical merit, but more information is needed in broader context that maybe is best dealt with at the council and or the committee level. So here we are. So we have the opportunity to bring all this together. Again, the council has been petitioned. So while the proponents are very important in this process, now this is in front of the council to bring this into rulemaking and conduct the public process. So, but thank you, Patrick. I don't disagree with you. I just that's what we've established as going forward. So, okay, Kane, please.
Yes, hi. Thank you. As I mentioned at the outset, I'm a multifamily builder located in Kitsap County, and I wanted to offer a perspective on what the implications are for requiring just the wall chargers. It's an interesting influence that's coming out of the insurance industry, where they are requiring that we replace wall chargers with actual stations and relocate them further away from the entrance. And they also don't want EV bicycles stored anywhere near living quarters. So this is a retrofit on new construction that insurers are requiring, which is costly for a brand new building. And for a proposed building, of course, the more actual chargers are required, the greater the cost. And just a reflection on the cost implications for feasibility. If a project costs 100 to build and it's worth 100 when it's finished, only a fool would build the project then. They could do better putting the money in the mattress. And so even if the project is worth 103 after it's finished, you're still better off putting your money into a CD. So if a project needs a certain profitability for it to move forward, this we understand. And if the project is infeasible, at the time it doesn't get built, supply isn't delivered, and rents increase for apartments. So that's the fundamental dynamic, right? So the greater that we increase the cost requirement, the longer it takes for new supply to be delivered. And parking is a big implication on the bottom line of the pro forma. So I thought I would just offer this perspective and what the influences are when it goes to implementation.
And Kane, with that kind of perspective, do you have an opinion, a recommendation of where these numbers should land?
I
And
do, yeah.
okay.
And Patrick was talking about statewide statistics. King, Pierce, Snohomish, Kitsap County is the fourth of the Puget Sound Regional Economic Council collection of counties. So we're up there in terms of density and such for the region, but we're not seeing the adoption of EVs that the other three counties are, and much less, even further outlying counties. And so the requirement imposed statewide, I think, is aggressive, and a lot of those just go unused, at least today. So, if there's no cabling going whatsoever, and it's a later retrofit that's required in 10, 20 years, that's not a significant hurdle to retrofit then. So I would recommend for the reduction of requirement for parking, or table it for further discussion, as Patrick was saying, with more input from the public.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Quinn, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Quinn Tai, I'm going to actually speak on behalf of myself as a resident of Washington State. So from a perspective of a prior HOA board member for condominium, and as well as a renter while the condo was being built. So I kind of disagree that about the cost, because cost is going to be deferred to tenants and homeowners, right? When I bought my condo, the developer basically said, if we'll give you 2 parking spaces, but if you want EV, pay an extra $5,000. So we're paying for the owners are going to be paying for it. It's not the developers themselves. It's an option right now. As a board member, after the building was constructed, every single EV was pre-sold, every single one of them. So, and then afterwards, we've had homeowners come and say, "Hey, I want an EV as well, but we don't have the capacity." So, like in the 18 code, it was 10% total parking for the capable parking spaces. That was already stretched. So I think if as a condo owner slash HOA board member, having the building construct with 25% more capable space would have helped us board members, satisfy some of the owners. When I was renting at one of the apartments, you could pay extra for an EV. So it's not really a shared space, like what Patrick was saying earlier, that these EVs are shared. Some apartments may be shared, but some, you lease them specifically for yourself. So just a little perspective. If I had to choose from a private entity, I would say, the third option would be my favorite. If I had to compromise, first the 15% reduction and the 25 increase for the capable. If we could combine those two, to me, that would be a good compromise. And I think I said this in the IFC tag as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Quinn. Annette, yeah, please go ahead.
I had her raise her hand for me.
Oh, yeah, jump in anytime, sorry.
Well, while I'm sharing screen, I don't have the react buttons that everybody else does, so I asked Annette to raise her hand for me. I wanted to just point out 2 things that have been discussed at other meetings. So we have 3 proposals before us, but that doesn't mean that we have to adopt any of them. So as a potential 4th option for folks to just keep in mind is the option to keep the code as it sits today, which is compliant with the law, and we're not increasing or decreasing. The second one that I heard in a couple different meetings that I think is relevant to the potential for the SBCC to increase the requirement is that EV technology is not the only zero emission technology out there. I know that it is the most current and in our face technology, but there's development on hydrogen burning engines and things like that. And I just want to bring up those points because I thought that they were relevant to the conversation for should we increase in anticipation of 100% adoption of electric vehicles as the zero emissions technology that we're backing as a council. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. And maybe I'll use this opportunity to add the criteria that the council has to use for consideration of this. I mean, it's broad, but it has to be a cost benefit, argument. So it's not what is the least cost. It's given there is some mandated or other benefit that is trying to be achieved for whatever reason. What is the argument for that cost benefit ratio compared to the do nothing scenario, which is what I would call denial of all 3 petitions. So please, if you can think about that as you're making your arguments, that would be the most helpful to the committee and the council. Okay, Kurt, please.
Thank you. Todd, that was helpful. So in light of what you just said, I would say this increasing thresholds is not ripe yet. We're not using the capacity except in isolated situations, as Quinn identified in his particular instance. This is overall, in my opinion, and I think opinion of the public, and maybe that's why we're trying to shield this from public, is in the process, is that it's agenda based and it's not market based. The market will dictate when this threshold change is ripe, and you know, it is in our face, and this agenda pushing electric vehicles, and while some folks like them, others don't. And as one of the prior speakers said, you know, there are other alternatives to electric vehicles that are more friendly than fossil fuels to the environment. And we will never be 100% electric EV. We're foolish to think that's going to happen, because the technology is there for alternatives. The grid can't handle. And I know this is probably not the conversation to have that, because you guys have heard it time and time again, and the electric companies are telling you that. But we're in denial, and we're just going to keep, you know, the legislature keeps pushing us. Well, let the electric companies figure it out. But in the end, you know, we need to provide opportunity, but at the same time, if my buildings that I'm building are in a market that doesn't have a strong demand for EV, I'm adding cost to the construction that goes, as Quinn's articulated, to the renter. In my case, driving up rental costs. I see nothing in the paperwork here, and maybe I missed it, of what that financial analysis is of these three proposals, and the impact and the cost benefit of these relative to either a cost per stall under each scenario, or the cost of, you know, per stall per charger. It's, again, the tenants are in a lot of markets other than King and Pierce are very stretched for affordability in just getting into an apartment. Now, you have affordability arguments in all of these, you know, Puget Sound markets, but adding additional cost where the demand isn't yet there or ripe, and then you're putting that cost on that we'll never be able to get it back, right? It's always going to have to get passed on. I question that, because of the amount of housing stock that's out there today relative to what we bring on annually in single family or multifamily. If you look at those numbers, all this stuff that we're doing, energy code, all these things, we're doing things because we think more is better. But in the end, the real issues are the existing stock, and how we deal with that and the cost of dealing with it. So those are other issues, and I know some of that is argument for, well, let's make it ready now so we don't have that cost later. And you also have the argument of there's going to be alternatives to electric, so electric will be part of the overall solution, but it's not the only solution, and it never will be. So I'm here supporting BIW's option, or just the status quo, because I think we've gone too far thus far for where we're at in the market and with our regulatory scheme. And again, if buyers or renters want, desire these charging stations, guess what? The builders, the landlords, the HOAs will fund and do these things. No different than when I build a subdivision and I don't put the recreation equipment in that the future HOA deems to think is necessary, and they'll go spend tens of thousands of dollars of their own money to upgrade and do things that are different than what I planned. I do what was the code requirement. In some areas, sometimes I do more. It kind of depends on what the market is and what I'm building. And I don't think this is any different. So there is a cost. It is not de minimis, and it's scalable, especially when you get into the structured parking elements and you know, the stalls that are required to be set aside, and in many cases are limited, where you can't park there unless you're EV. So now we're having to build more stalls in structured parking than might otherwise be needed. So anyway, that's my perspective. I urge you to seek more public comment on this topic and not just keep it to a confined decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. And thank you for recognizing that we could go down a lot of rabbit holes on this and trying to keep it focused. One of those rabbit holes, I shouldn't call it that. We are doing site versus source hearing at the full council meeting next week. And so if you have written testimony, I believe today is the deadline, 5 p.m. today. Is that correct, Dustin?
Yes, sir.
And then we will take oral testimony next Friday. So please join us for that, and please submit written testimony if you have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Micah.
Thank you. Today, of course, I'm going to speak for myself and my opinion in the evaluation of these proposals. I've spoken on them several times. In the testimony so far, I really haven't heard what I think is the kind of the crux of where we stand with these proposals, and that is the RCW 1927-540. It's been modified twice in the last few years. If those of you may not be aware, the current ratios and percentages have only been in effect. I think tomorrow will make 12 months since these have gone into effect. And we're pushing for more. One of the big questions that was asked and requested of the full council, which I don't believe was answered, is do we or does the council believe that we're already meeting the expectations of the RCW? The last, or item 3A of this bill says the rule shall exceed the requirements of section 2. When you read section 2 and you look at the current code and you do an analysis, we already exceed the minimum requirements of section 2. The question today is if we want to push something more. Dustin made an excellent point on EV is not the only zero emission vehicle. So this council, this tag, needs to make a recommendation on what they believe is the appropriate percentage of EV parking spaces or infrastructure, regardless of vehicle types. I, for one, if I could go back and ask a developer to put in a diesel pump for me, that'd be great, based on my choice of vehicle. That's what's being forced here. Unfortunately, again, this is my own personal opinion. If you make the choice of an EV, I'm sorry, I think you should have to provide that infrastructure yourself or pay for it somewhere else. To make developers do that up front, I think is a disservice to the developer and the development community. Now, is there a balance that needs to be provided? Sure. I think that needs to be addressed with the code as we're doing and other codes. This has specifics for electrical code. Unfortunately, the SBCC does not have a seat at the electrical board for the Washington state. What you see at the electrical code is that most times they still provide more capacity than is necessary for a structure. That's why the energy code is now going to allow for existing buildings to use an energy intensity calculation. And some of the folks that are smarter than me can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but they're going to evaluate your energy intensity to determine things you can or can't do when you upgrade your existing building. So again, I think some of the concerns about capacity not being there are false. Because that energy intensity calculation saying, oh, you can do a lot of stuff in your existing building because you're not using your capacity anyway. I really think that we need to evaluate as the tag, the RCW. That's what gives us the direction. You've all heard me say many times the RCW is incorrect. I want to say that the L&I representative that came on and spoke to us about the electrical numbers in here, the 208, 240, 40 volt or 40 amp stuff is not necessarily accurate. They will inspect it when it's installed, but they're not reviewing the numbers or the requirement. Again, I think our percentages are adequate where they are. We need to let this maybe sit for one more code cycle and then probably do a lot of adjustments. We'll see a better picture of the adoption or inclusion of EV across the state. We'll have a better number, and I think we'll still get to the point where you'll be able to install adequate EV for the adoption of EV. And then I think we'll probably have to adjust rules to adopt other requirements for other zero emission vehicles. Lots of questions to answer here, but I think we're just spinning in circles on the percentage. I'm not sure it matters either way. You can increase it to 40%. I think what you're seeing in this instance now in many jurisdictions, they're moving away from any parking requirements anyway. So you're not going to get this installed by a developer in a lot of multifamily areas because they're not requiring parking. That is occurring in Seattle. They don't require parking.
And
So
Spokane,
good stuff. Spokane as well, I think, is moving to that.
whole city.
You're not going to get this infrastructure anyway. Sorry. Go ahead. I'll stop.
No, no, Mike, I'm smiling because as anticipated and appreciated, you're raising the right grounding. We need to frame this thing in you know, and this RCW is very important that we make sure everyone understands why we are mandated to talk about this. And I know you made a comment, Micah, that you might disagree with this, but none of us have the power to, you know, we can disagree, but none of us have the power to change it. This is the law. And there are other laws, right? And we don't, again, I don't want to go down rabbit holes, but there are other laws that dictate and say that the legislature has said that electric vehicles specifically are part of the solution to address something. I'm not going to get into the what and where, but you know what the different climate and other acts that number discussing. I think it's important, Micah's point, that we frame this and we're not talking about how this power is supplied and so forth. This is about what is our role as the State Building Code Council to, in section 3 there, this is the one that I've always questioned and would like a lot of help with. The extent necessary to support the anticipated levels. It's not, and so that's really an important piece of this is, are we doing our job if the State Building Code Council says 0? And I would argue no, because it's not anticipating what the demand is going to be. The next question I have is, are we doing our job if you look at the current levels of adoption, which is part of the arguments that were made at the TAG level for or against? I don't know. I'll give you my opinion. I don't think so, because you're not anticipating where it's going. So now that leads to forecasting, and that's tough. How do we, but in that, again, giving my opinion, that's why I think it does belong in rulemaking, so that every 3 years we can look at this. Just like we do in energy, we know what the target is, but we get the opportunity in a rulemaking process to tweak that every 3 years. So I think that's what we're doing right here. And then that's part of the argument why I'm trying to frame this. I know I'm going off on a little bit of
Are you going down a rabbit hole, Todd?
I'm trying not to. I'm trying to frame this to get more input, ideally. And if I'm doing a poor job at that,
You're doing a fabulous job. I
feel
think
free
you're
to say
right
that.
on track, especially with the anticipated language here, and that's you bring up the exact concern I'm trying to reference here in the RCW. Where is the data to help us gather the anticipated information to appropriately provide a recommendation for the right percentage? None of these proposals are providing that anticipated data. The only thing is we have a desire to include or adopt many EVs or other zero emission vehicles, but what is the anticipated for EV specific? And that data is not included in any of these proposals. Thanks.
And then someone please help us understand what that means in the life cycle of that building, in the life cycle of the financing, in the life cycle of just so forth. That's the complexity we're talking about here. So, okay, let's keep going. Thank you, Micah. Kane.
Yes, thank you. I largely agree with what Micah said, with what Kurt said. I wanted to offer some color on what the dynamic is when Micah said that the increased requirement for EV adoption would be a disservice to the developers. It's really a disservice to the resident occupant, whether for sale as a condominium or for rent for an apartment, because if it costs too much to build, in my analogy of building for 100 versus 103 versus more, if it costs too much, I just won't build it until the revenues support its construction. And so Kurt was saying that, we'll just raise the rents to accommodate. It's not as if we're holding back on the rents when we deliver a new product. what's really happening is we're just waiting until the economics pencil until we build. And so until it pencils, we won't build. Until rents climb to the amount that justifies the construction, we just won't build. And so the demand grows and the supply is stagnant because it's too costly because of requirements for this, that, and the other, including EVs. Then the supply just isn't delivered until it reached that threshold. So so it's not that we're just passing off the cost to the renter and increasing the rent to accommodate. We're just waiting until the market's rents will support that. That's the nuanced difference. And so I wanted to respond to, I think it was Kuhn, who is the condominium owner, who is in a small minority of residents in multifamily. The vast majority, maybe 80–90% of all multifamily built in the state are for rent. And so we can't have that discussion with individual occupants to say, yeah, you can pay $5,000 more and we'll build for you. That can't occur. And so we're building to a renter who can't afford the condominium, right? So it's a different price point generally, especially in the outlying areas outside of King, Snohomish, Pierce, certainly Kitsap, and where I am. And so so the dynamic that he offers, where just pay $5,000 more, is really in the minority. So I wanted to offer that. Again, this cost is significant. It's upfront, and the greater that we require the e-fee adoption upfront, and especially as the insurance companies require that we put full service stations in, and not just deadheads for later implementation, it further increases the cost. If one of the options is to roll back the requirement, that would be my encouragement.
Kane, thank you. Can I ask a specific question?
Yes.
Can you think about what would be the appropriate time frame that we should be anticipating? I think that's what I'm struggling with. It's not 0 years. I don't think we're allowed to do that. I don't think it's 100 years. Is it 10
Right.
years that aligns with financing? Is it 5 years? Like, how should the council be advised to consider the cost benefit at a certain time frame? So just, you don't have to answer right now, but just if all can think about that and come back. Yeah.
If I may, yeah,
Yeah,
a couple of things. One, it would just depend on where, right? In the dense areas with the higher incomes who are buying and using more EVs than earlier than later. But I would also reference Kurt's reference that the market will dictate. And if I release an apartment with 200 units and 20 of them have EV capacity, the EV stations, and I've got renters, 30 or 40 who want them, well, and I'm not just waiting for one project to be delivered, right? I'm looking at market research of nearby stations to see what capacity and absorption is. And I know that 30 or 40 of my renters are going to require it. Otherwise, they'll go to apartments that do have that capacity. Then I'll build to meet that demand. So does it have to be a requirement governed, or can it just be market driven? I would say it could be market driven, just like the requirements for parking stalls at all.
Okay. I guess the question, Kane, there is, do we get that decision? Because as we look at this RCW, we're being told, to anticipate. But I don't, that's not an opinion. I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's our.
Well, then I would err on the side of a conservative and say the requirement doesn't have to be a high number or anticipate when. The requirement can go with the minimum requirement out of the BA, out of this recommendation. The requirement can be the minimum, and please be pleasantly surprised if the market determines that we need more EV than the requirement is, and the builders will build it.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Okay, Patrick.
I don't need to be rude.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of really good discussion going on. In response to something that Micah brought up, regarding the forecasting, that was discussed at the tag level, and I was asked to go do some additional research beyond what the form requires as a proponent, and I did that. I looked into the history of the code language and the bill, and I contacted WashDOT trying to find out more about the tool that was in the original bill that they were supposed to create to help local governments, and presumably the State Building Code Council could use that in their legislative directive to try to forecast. And WashDOT hasn't completed that tool. So I think the legislature has kind of given the council a very challenging task to do something that most economists and people very educated about this topic would struggle to do, which is to try to forecast what the total EV charging demand is going to be over the life cycle of these buildings, and then try to figure out where to put that within the built environment. And based off what I recall from going through the 2021 cycle, I don't think the increases in requirements were done based off forecasting. It's just they increased the numbers, they came with code language, and it was approved. So I think it's a little frustrating that when you're asking for a reduction for something that was never forecasted in the first place, you're asking the proponent of the reduction to do something that was never done in the first place. I think the forecasting is important, but if that's the case, you should also do forecasting to try to justify the current requirements, because I don't think that was done originally. And demand for EV charging doesn't need to be met solely or primarily by multifamily. We also have requirements for commercial buildings. People are going to be able to charge at work. They're going to be able to charge when they're shopping. There's also private, state, federal efforts to increase the number of charging stations, so people can go to a charging station and charge as well. So when it comes to King County's proposal, I think jacking it up to where in some cases you're going to have almost a 1-to-1 ratio as a minimum requirement of each dwelling unit having a dedicated parking space with EV charging infrastructure. That to me just does not make economic sense. And then you think about all the wasted materials and the unnecessary waste that goes into that when there's going to be lots of other chargers as well. You don't need to put that all into multifamily parking and provide every dwelling unit with a dedicated charging space as a minimum requirement for the whole state. There's parts in King and Snohomish County and other counties with high adoption rates where that might make sense. You know, I can see if you're building something in Bellevue and you've got lots of tech workers who drive electric vehicles, yeah, you're probably going to want a lot of chargers in there. But you know, in a county where they have less than 100 EVs right now, that doesn't make sense for a requirement. Thank you.
Patrick, just a follow-up question. So in your discussion of essentially sharing this requirement, I mean, how would you envision that in the code though, since it's really kind of out of the, you know, you're talking about microgrids and other things. How would you propose that across different parcels, essentially, since the building code only deals with individual parcels, right?
I'm not sure what you're asking. Like,
well, you're saying there's a balance between commercial, multifamily, so forth, whether it's within a geographical area like microgrids or it's shared across just your daily, you know, your daily life, right? But how would that be addressed in the building codes? I think that's one of the challenges perhaps the council would have, right?
I think the code, I think you're right. I don't think the code can only require what buildings do. So you can't say, oh, you know, the cities in this quadrant need to have X number of charges available. That's for other bodies of government to do if they want to do that. But I think the code already tries to split it up, although it still is primarily on multifamily, because you have the other requirements in that code language pertaining to the other occupancy groups. So when it comes to increasing it just on multifamily, I think that's not timely when you know, we could get more data on EV charging behavior as time goes on and adoption rates go up and more buildings get built under this code requirement to see if people start using it. Because if you're at work for 8 hours and there's EV chargers there, you can charge it there, and the code is putting those chargers and infrastructure in place. So
I guess maybe are you advocating that if there is forecasting being done, that the daily patterns could be considered as some sort of adjustment in that forecasting? I think that's what you could be saying. I don't know if that is what you're saying, but that could be a way to address that.
If you do forecasting, I think that's absolutely something you want to consider. What are the charging patterns and behaviors of people, try to estimate the demand of what occupancy types need to have chargers. It's my opinion, I think that forecasting, and WashDOT in their own analysis has said that forecasting is incredibly hard to do with what the legislature has asked. And I know there's a lot of knowledgeable people at the council level, but that's a really tough ask to try to get that kind of detailed forecasting and figure out what you need for each occupancy group, not just right now, but then try to predict what you're going to need over the life cycle of the building. That's challenging is probably even an understatement for that.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Okay, Kurt, please.
Yeah, to follow up on that point, I think that it is more difficult to look forward than it is retrospectively and look at what we've accomplished and where we are against the current thresholds and desires in the code. So you look at forecasting. I think you got to truth check it based on how we're progressing under the existing limits and that trajectory. I don't disagree that looking at this periodically to see where things are. But again, reinforcing the fact that I think we're further than we need to be currently, taking out personal opinions of folks and looking at kind of reality of where things are, what's happening, and the infrastructure that has been articulated is growing around us outside of the units in charging stations and other locations that can be used. And also to follow up on Kane's comment, to clarify, I will never pay for any of this infrastructure as a developer and builder. It will always get passed on, and projects will stop, as Kane said, in their tracks until they fundamentally make economic sense for financing purposes. So I think what Kane was trying to articulate is, in this housing crisis that we have, and this is at no fault of the council or the committee, the legislature is coming at us with all these demands. This falls into a building cost, just as the energy code changes and everything else we're dealing with, and those compound to exacerbate our housing crisis that we're in. And I just like to kind of articulate, if you the comment I made about looking back and seeing where we are in that trend line. While we'd all like to build more roads and schools and have more commercial development closer to our homes, where we live, so we don't have to drive to it, those items don't happen until after the fact. Commercial development doesn't come until after there's rooftops. Schools and roads don't come just by the nature of the funding mechanisms and reality of where the revenue comes from to actually be able to afford that stuff. Comes after the cars are on the road and after we have congestion. We can't afford to do it in advance. And what we're asking here is, okay, do it in advance and somebody pay for it and still keep rents where they're at or still keep housing prices controlled. We can't do that. And again, the market driven factors here is, if I as a builder developer see that I need to do this to be competitive, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to figure out what I take out of other potential needs or desires of tenants to offset this particular demand that I need to meet. And so while we already have an existing level to meet in the code, increasing it without, again, doing some really robust look at the cost impacts on a per stall or per charging station unit, and taking into consideration the fact that, yes, many jurisdictions in the urban core where we have a high usage of electric vehicles relative to the majority of the Puget Sound area, the parking limit or requirements are going away. So yeah, you don't get that. So not to repeat things, but I think it's important to reinforce the fact that where we're actually talking, the stations aren't going to be built anyway. So again, think about the market driven and the market factors, and the minimum requirements that we have today, I think are sufficient. And the committee is doing its job by having this conversation, looking back at where we are, and it may be ripe for increase at another review. But I think status quo today is good. Thank you.
Kurt, just to clarify, when you say, in a city like Seattle or Spokane or others that don't have parking requirements, it doesn't mean that obviously parking is not being built. It just means the market is driving that requirement, which still falls under the code.
Well, actually, no, because when we build in an area that doesn't have a parking requirement, that is deferred to the public and it becomes a public cost, and the government is finding ways to subsidize in this case, because most developers, you look at the malls, you look at any places where these things are being added, they're being done with grants. As a shopping center developer or a commercial developer, I'm doing smaller commercial projects. I'm not putting EV chargers in. The demand isn't there, and the cost is it's throwing money away because my customers and my tenants aren't demanding it. Well, if the government's getting grants and this whole conversation is again agenda based, and that's why government has to throw so much money at it. It's when the parking requirements go away, it becomes street parking. And then the street parking is where we have to put these charging stations, and that's not funded by the developer. That's funded by a broad-based tax or some sort of subsidies that come from government.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. I think I maybe meant within a development, but thank you, Kurt. I appreciate that. Quinn.
Yeah, I just want to circle back what Kane and Kurt was saying, and I think I was probably misunderstood a little bit. So I don't disagree with what Kane and Kurt was saying about that. The 15%, 20%, 25%. We're so focused on the first two columns. I think that's where the cost is at. And you're right. I mean, this council right here has to look at the building code for Washington State as a whole, not just King County or Pierce County or anything. It's just all of Washington State. So with that said, like Kathleen's proposal, she's more focused on King County. So I don't personally have an issue with Pat's proposal for lowering it. My only concern is that I really like the third proposal, where the capacity is there if the renter, if like in Kurt's scenario where you have 30 to 40 renters who want EV charging, but you only have 10, the building can then be just easily upgraded to add those charging stations already. My understanding of these three versions, that like number of EV charging, and then these columns, the one on the left is the higher cost, and it goes down in cost as as you go to the right. The developers, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but like the left column, number of EV charging stations, that cost right there is going to be really high. And then the capable, just having it capable, the cost is low. But like the example I gave with my building, people want it. We just don't have the capability to provide it. I mean, without spending tens of thousands of dollars to upgrade the wiring, upgrade all the branch circuits and everything. So I think, like I said earlier, I mean, if we could combine those two, I'd be okay with it, because the 15% does help Washington State and the developers as a whole. And then the number of capable parking spaces, the 25, helps the tenants, owners. And I think it also addresses your question about anticipation. To me, that third column is all about anticipation. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Micah.
Thanks, Quinn. Yeah, thanks everyone. I want to say thanks to Patrick for keeping me in check. You did come back with some information on numbers, and all the proposals did have some numbers in there, and I think that's, of course, what we need to get back to. One thing though, Patrick, you did mention was that folks can go charge their vehicles while they're shopping. If you went by the RCW under the original 2019 language of the RCW, mercantile, which is shopping for you, would not be required to provide EV infrastructure except for employee parking, which nobody knows what that is. If you've got a shell and core, you don't know what your employees are going to be. You don't know what's going to be in that building. So you can't provide that. That's why the 2021 version, again, made some changes to that section that addressed those type of occupancies to say, hey, if it's larger than 200 parking spaces, you're going to provide something, which was beyond, again, that's where we're addressing item 3, which is exceeding the minimum requirement in item 2 of that RCW. I think we do need to go back and get some numbers. I'm not the greatest at math, but looking at Ross Freeman from King, I think it's King County's proposal, looking at their numbers, they're indicating that by 2035, we need 2 million spaces to meet the zero emission requirements. Based on the current number, if I'm reading there again, if you go back up, if you're looking at this proposal, if you go up a little bit to their numbers where they provided the baseline, the current code, they're saying for a 24 unit building, you need 6 EV ready and 3 EV capable. So 9 stalls of some type of EV infrastructure. My understanding then, my basic math would be that you would need to provide, to meet that 2 million number by 2035, you need to provide a total of about 225,000 EV stalls, EV infrastructure stalls of some type, of the mixed type. The question I have that nobody's providing, and maybe I need to figure that out on my own, but you know, it's usually the job of the proponents, is does the current number, current minimum requirements in this table, will that meet the anticipated, which I think is in their proposal, anticipated 2 million EV infrastructure parking places by 2035? I think there's some more data that would have to be pulled in, like what's the average number of parking stalls that are being constructed annually, and then the percentage of those that they're meeting EV. The unfortunate side of these proposals, that doesn't show existing construction where somebody comes in and retrofits to provide infrastructure for their own EV. So again, we're not getting the answer that I think this tag needs, is are we currently meeting the anticipated need based on the direction of the RCW? I'd like to get that from the proponents. Either way, are we meeting it or not? I think that's needed to be provided. The last thing I think Patrick mentioned was talking about the analysis of this was not provided during the last code change. You're correct. I believe all that occurred during the last cycle was that we went off of the revised legislation. If you're not aware, there was legislation in 2019. They immediately turned around and changed it again in 2021. We're having a real tight timeline in there for us to make modifications. So I don't think that was addressed. We just met what the council believed was the minimum requirements of the RCW, and then some other areas where we exceeded those minimum requirements based on percentages. And then, of course, that section that I talked about with the assembly, education, and mercantile occupancies, where we are providing something minimum for that. So I'd like to get that answer. I think the tag needs it. Are we meeting the numbers now? What is the actual percentage we need to increase to meet the anticipated need, which is the direction of the RCW? Thanks.
Micah, since we'll designate you as the SBCC historian, or can you or others kind of remind us why we have 3 categories? Does anyone know? Instead of just 2?
I believe that was another, hey, we want to capture this based on current definitions that we're going through at the international code level. And that's where
there's some basis there at ICC that they have 3 categories.
Well, they had 3 definitions, and I think this table is based on those 3 definitions: the charging, the ready, and the capable. And those, and that's where that language came from. And I believe that's why we went. I do believe that was discussed. Why should we only have the 2 categories based on the language of the RCW in item 2? Because there is only 2 categories there.
You do remember that was debated, but then it was chosen perhaps to align more with ICC?
I believe that came in when we debated and brought in the definitions.
Okay.
Because this table is new for 2021. And there may be others that remember differently. I'm trying to provide the best information I've got.
Patrick,
I just recall that Stoyan had come up with a proposal, and then there was a proposal from the public, and they ended up kind of meshing the 2. Where the source for those 2 proposals, I don't recall from, but the decision was to just kind of blend the 2 and
You're, Patrick, you're saying your research was that Stoyan as staff, because it was a legislative mandate, he came up with a recommendation.
And I think he based his on California.
Okay.
I recall.
And that was 2 categories or 3 categories?
I don't remember how many categories he had, but it was formatted very different. And then I think the proposal from the public had the table, and they ended up kind of meshing the two.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the formatting from one and kind of the substance from the other.
Yeah, Todd, this is Hoyt. Yeah,
Yeah.
it did California. It did come from California, is where exactly what Patrick's saying. Some of the bit, and the capability one was the same thing. This was kind of driven, and there was some input, actually, from Oregon too. There were some people that gave some input. So yeah, I've been doing that. But basically, it tried to follow that for the capable, because I don't know if you guys remember how we were selling energy to California and ripping them off. A lot of it was driven by their energy crisis that they're having and things like that. And that's why they started putting in some of this stuff. And these EV capable parking was something they wanted to make sure they got in there. So just an FYI. So
Okay, and thank you for that. I'm just trying to pull this out a little bit because Quinn made an interesting point where, there could be a baseline that's established somehow, category 1, and then a base, something that deals with anticipated, right? Which is maybe column 3. So I'm just trying to unpack the history a little bit. Thank you for everyone. Okay, let's go to Ron. You're next. Ron, are you available? If not, I'll come back to you.
Yep,
Go ahead.
I'm ready. You got
Thanks,
me?
Ron. Yep.
Okay, so I'm Ron Perkowitz, Inspection and Permit Services, member of the previous code tag, member of the new code tag on the IRC, and I would like to just say we just do nothing. I'm kind of like Micah, wait till we get some data on what we've had in place for a short while. I think if we crystal ball and look nationally, we're going to see a surge or a push to drop a lot of these standards. The state's now reducing the required parking stalls. And I can tell you, as just a plain old regular guy now, I go to a commercial place and I try to find a place to park. I've got some EV chargers. I've got some handicap stalls. I've got some veteran stalls. I've got contractors with trailers only. I've got bicycle stalls. I've got employee of the month stalls. And I'm parking in the back corner of the dang place. And then I look around and all these stalls are empty. So I think we need to just let it go for another code cycle even to try and see what the real need is out there based on what we have in place. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ron. That absolutely is an option. Although I also think we've opened this up and we need to try to do our best to come up with some baseline so that this isn't maybe we're in a better place in 3 years on the next code cycle.
It goes by real fast.
It goes by fast. That's true, Ron. Thank you. Okay. Patrick.
Yes, I wanted to point out that by moving a proposal to CR 102 doesn't require that the council adopt it. But you will be required to perform preliminary and final cost benefit analysis. So you'll have to get a little more data for that on that, and have a bit more information on what the cost benefit is for this. And you can always do more forecasting analysis to provide to go with that. Something that Micah brought up when it comes to forecasting, if you're trying to do it at sort of work at, well, how many total chargers do we need? And then how do we work that back to how many should we require in each occupancy? That requires that you also have an estimate of how many new buildings you're going to have built for each occupancy over that time period, which I think is, nearly impossible to try to figure out, how many multifamily buildings are going to be built by 2050 and have that be an accurate number. Which is why at the tag level, I made a spreadsheet and shared with staff. I don't know if it ever got out to the tag members, but I tried looking at just saying, okay, well, what will the residents need for each building, and try to forecast it that way. And the current code, when you compare the number of parking spaces with EV charging infrastructure to how many dwelling units they have, it requires between 50 to 75% ratio depending on what the ratio of parking spaces to dwelling units is. My proposal would bring that down to, it's about, it would be below that, but then King counties would obviously drastically increase that. And so that's how I tried to forecast, was just look at how much what will the tenants of the buildings need? Because I think it's incredibly challenging to try to figure out by 2050, how many total electric vehicles will we have? How many charging stations will we need? How many will we need in each building category? How many buildings are going to be built? And then try to figure out how many to require that way. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And again, going really deep on process here. The challenge of the State Building Code Council in Washington is that we operate more as a legislative process. Like other states like California, Colorado, it's all administrative. It's an agency like Commerce or whatever it might be. But we have to adhere to administrative procedures. And so, filing the rulemaking process is administrative technically. So the challenge is always, once we get to Sierra 102, yes, we can do substantial changes, but that's an actual term that then triggers, refiling and so forth. And we're trying to do a better job this cycle. So it's not that we can't do that. We're just trying to be very deliberate and transparent so that we do as much front end work as we can, but it doesn't mean once we file Sierra 102 that we can't do substantial changes and refile and have 20-day periods and things like that. So it's just the process. So, but thank you. Okay, go ahead, Micah.
Thanks, and thanks for so much robust discussion on this, folks. I have some questions on the actual proposals and technical language. I think Quinn alluded to some of this, is looking at combining percentages of two columns. Do we have the correct percentages? I guess I would love to hear from the proponents their interpretation of the three columns, because they are based on definitions. An EV ready parking space is a parking space provided with a receptacle outlet allowing charging of electrical vehicles. My days as an electrician, a receptacle, it seems, something you plug into. Where my understanding of most EVs is you have something you plug into the EV. So that seems backwards to me. But again, I'm not an expert. Then the EV capable parking space has the conduit, electrical panel, and load capacity for future installation. And then the actual EV charging station, which is the first column, is EV ready parking space installed with installed EV charger. So the EV ready parking space is ready for the charger, is how I'm understanding that. And then the capable is just the load capacity. Is that what the proponents agree with? Again, I think we need to get back to the proposal and go, are the three columns correct? Maybe Quinn, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Were you alluding to combining a percentage or combining one of the columns with the other and having a greater percentage there? Do the proponents believe that EV ready parking spaces are better prepared than EV capable parking spaces? And would there be some other type of compromise to come to here, or are we just going to straight look at the only percentage number here and not evaluate the accuracy or completeness of the table and if it's actually effective? I think that kind of goes back to, this has only been in effect for a year, so do we have really enough data to say, yes, this table is correct, the percentages are wrong, or maybe this table is incorrect based on the actual definitions of what these things are and what that means when they're installed. So that's my opening line for the discussion on the actual proposals themselves. And I'm concerned that if we maybe only look at this as the percentage numbers, that we may not be getting it accurate then either. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Go ahead, Kane.
Yeah, on the middle column, I want to remind that if the insurance company requires that an outlet be upgraded, in fact, to a full station, then the effectiveness of the middle column goes away and it becomes a full station by an outside influence.
So Kane, I mean, this is a kind of great stuff to unpack. Can someone defend why that we have the middle column? And I don't mean that to sway the opinion of anyone, but when I ask that, if it comes from California, comes from ICC, so forth, is that before or after more advancements in load sharing and whatever that technology is called? We've discussed this a lot on this council of not having dedicated circuits for each spot, but being able to have load management. Is that the correct term?
I can answer that, Todd.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So the number of EV ready parking spaces, okay, that means you actually have everything pulled through. You actually have it ready where you just have to go put on the thing.
You paid for the wire and the circuit, correct?
Wire and the circuits there, everything's ready to go, but you don't have to physically have the actual box where you plug into the EV thing. When you get the EV capable parking spaces, that's where you've put the conduits in to where you're able to pull the wires and all that stuff at a later state or a later time. Those are kind of the two difference. And the reason they do the EV ready one is exactly for technology changes. Okay. So sometimes the EV charging ones, like now we have the rapid charger, but the old ones didn't have a rapid charger on some of them. So now you could take that EV ready and you could put in a rapid charger without removing the other one if you wanted to, or you could remove the other one and do it like that. That was the reason behind the 2V. So really EV ready is just, it's ready to go. It just doesn't have the actual box and everything hooked up. And that was kind of, the reason they put that in is kind of similar to what Patrick was telling, because they said, well, let's save costs. You don't have to you don't have to have it. One of the things they did where they had in EV parking, they used to have where you could only have an EV parking parked there. Okay. For EV ready, right, they're able to have anyone parking. So now they actually have it where they can combine the parking where people can use it. They could post a sign and things like that. There's a lot of reasons behind where that came from. So that's kind of how it was developed. And that's my understanding based on some of the committees and meetings I've been down in different areas. And this is it from Oregon also. I talked to people from Oregon. So a lot of this is driven where I'm hearing this is on the West Coast. I don't know much about other parts of the country though. So
Hoyt, that's really helpful. But what I'm hearing is you're asking this table, not you, the table is asking for an asset to be invested in and uncapitalized. And the second part I heard there was the circuit technology could change with load management and so forth. And I'm wondering if this is a dated conversation already, even though it might have been 3 years ago. I don't have the answer, and it's really helpful, Hoyt, to be able to ground this in experiences with those committees.
The codes change over time.
Yeah.
I want to say the one thing to get back on something else, in this market driven that everyone keeps bringing up, it's not market driven is to exceed what the code is. Code's a minimum. This is what we're trying to establish. And these codes are established for a long period of time. I mean, in these arguments, I had people arguing in the past for how long I've been doing this, putting 5/8 inch gypsum wallboard on garages to separate it. And they said we should have that market driven because of life safety. I mean, I'm just giving you my opinion. The market driven, the code is a minimum. I think we should actually adopt one of these things as a minimum, and then market driven will put more in there. So, and so I'm kind of I disagree with that. Trying to write a code to be driven off market. That's not the intent of writing the code. So, that's my opinion. So.
Okay, thank you, Hoyt. Micah, please. And just everyone, we have about 15. Is that right? Do we schedule this to 11 or 12 today?
Well, till 12.
Okay, well, keep going. Micah.
Excellent. So based on Hoyt's input there, I'm going to go back to putting on my technical code nerd hat that you all know I enjoy so much. I guess I don't or still won't understand the difference in a charging station and a ready parking space, Because what Hoyt indicated is that you're only running it up to a receptacle. However, that's not what the definition states. EV ready parking spaces is a parking space provided with a receptacle outlet. If that was the period, that would match what Hoyt just said. However, it continues that says allowing charging of electric vehicles. So that receptacle needs to allow for the charging of electric vehicles. That's
Micah, where are you pointing to what we're seeing on the code here?
No, we probably need to go to WAC 5150-0200 under the definitions. Again, we need to tie all this together. This is why we get into the technical aspects of it. So thanks, Dustin, to put you on the spot to pull up the definitions.
Yeah, Mike,
Technically do not get the significant difference between EV charging station and EV ready parking. One has an installed charger and one says you got to have a receptacle allowing for charging of EV. Again,
that's correct. And that's correct.
But what you just said, Hoyt, was that the receptacle is there, but you're not necessarily going to be able to plug into it and use it.
No, you misinterpreted. You misinterpreted.
Okay, that's why I'm saying what we're looking at here, these three columns. When I look at it, EV installed station and EV ready parking space sure seems like the same animal to me.
No, because one, it just has it. It's not actually, everything's not all connected up. So one, you
But it
actually have.
says it should be. That's the definition. It should allow for charging of EVs. That means it should be connected up. That's the reason I struggle with the three columns.
Yeah, but this says with a receptacle allowing charging. It doesn't say it's actually installed. It's allowing the charging. So that doesn't say it has to be hooked up. I think it is different. One, it's actually installed. You actually have it fully functional. Okay. And the other one is you have the receptacle and outlet allowing charges. So it's basically ready to be hooked up to be able to be hooked, but it's not actually physically hooked up yet. It's just allowing.
Is it hooked to a circuit and charged?
No, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have. No, it doesn't have to actually be hooked up to the power from. You could have them just separated. Not. It does not have to actually be. You have to be able to allow the charging. You have to be able to provide a receptacle outlet allowing charging an electrical vehicle. The other one is physically everything's completely installed with the charging. So you have, if you look at the EV, if you go to an EV parking, you got that little box, right? That has a cord that comes out that plugs in, right? That box doesn't have to be there, but all the other stuff has to be there. So you could put that box on there to be able to hook it up. That's the difference. Now, maybe the wording could be written better, but that was my understanding of the interpretation when I've talked to a lot of people on this, that you don't have that, you don't have to, I hope I'm being clear on that, with the cords and all that stuff, you may not even have the pipe that's there to support that, but you have everything else ready to go.
You are, Hoyt, and I think that gets a little more to my point as what you just said is that is your interpretation of that. I have a different interpretation and others may have a different interpretation. And so when the language is not clear for those applying this code, then it gets back to how are we determining as the technical advisory group, the accurate percentage or how this code applies if the interpretation cannot be clear across the board. It's not always clear across the board, but when it's this inconsistent, I think it's a problem. Thanks.
Okay. Good conversation. Thank you. Kurt.
Yeah, I think I would disagree that language does not require a electrical outlet connected and ready for use. I think that's an illogical interpretation in the practical sense. And I have experience in actually using this provision in lieu of the required charger, and jurisdictions agreeing that there's such little demand that the use of portable chargers from the trunk, plugged into the car, plugged into the outlet that I provide, meets the requirement. So I think it is different, and there's that need. And I would also argue that you know, the issue with that is you're unable to capture the cost of the electricity used for charging when you're doing that. But in my case, the demand is so low, it was negligible. And if that was to change in the future, well, guess what? We can put a charger there and capture the revenue. So there's different ways, and I guess what I'm elaborating on here proves my point. I can adapt to the market when the demand is there on an existing infrastructure and existing multifamily complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Looks like Dustin, are you jumping
Yeah.
in?
I just wanted to mention that I'm aware of certain hybrid vehicles that plug in as well. I don't have a bunch of models to list off the top of my head, but for example, like a Toyota RAV4 Prime is a hybrid that will allow you to plug in and actually run on EV or on an electric motor for a certain mileage out there. So I don't know if this definition is there to allow something like that to occur, but I thought it might be a relevant point to bring up that there are some hybridized vehicles out there that have a plug-in capability.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, let's go to Jason.
Thank you, Todd, for allowing me to speak. I'm a subject matter expert in electrical enforcement, and I have to back up what Kurt says and with Micah. If I am going out as an inspector and looking at that EV ready, based on the definition of the National Electrical Code, a receptacle outlet is just that. It's an outlet in the wiring system with a NEMA rated receptacle plug for the use of a portable electrical vehicle charger. So it would meet the same criteria, although not as convenient as the EVSE attached to that same conduit. Thank you.
Can you help some of us that aren't in this field of EVSE? Is that just, you know, like $1,500 specific hardwired charger? Is that what you mean?
What it is level 1, level 2, and level 3.
Uh-huh.
EVSE stands for Electrical Vehicle Supply Equipment.
Okay.
It's a listed category of electrical component that has a specific reference in Article 625 of the National Electrical Code. Also, in the National Electrical Code, I have a definition of what an outlet is versus a lighting outlet versus a receptacle outlet, and they're very specific.
Mm-hmm.
Each one has a specific definition, and by reading the statutory language of the definition in 5150, I would expect, as code enforcement, that I would see some kind of NEMA-rated receptacle, the correct ampacity, and the correct overcurrent protection. That's what I would inspect to. And in my mind, that would be an EV-ready installation. It would be inspected to 625 of the National Electrical Code.
That's helpful. Thank you.
And I appreciate, I've been listening in. I appreciate the council. I appreciate the subject matter expert and tech, but I here locally in the Tri-Cities area, I have all of my building officials. I work hand in hand with them because I'm not actually a city or county employee. So I have a special relationship where I have to always tie back in when I do a final here in the Tri-Cities as to what is their interpretation of what these requirements that are outside of the National Electrical Code, outside of the purview of 1928. If it's outside that purview, I have to interact with my building officials to make sure I'm expecting what is required and nothing more and nothing less.
Yeah, that's helpful. Can you give an opinion or give us a little insight on whether 3 categories are needed specifically between
No.
the 2? No.
In my mind, I'm going to either inspect to Article 300 and Article 200 if it's just pipe and wire in a J box, electrically safe J box. That's going to be an outlet.
That's going to be that category.
So, yeah, the other two are either going to have a listed EVSE hardwired in with all of the capability of monitoring, power management, load management, and be able to capture revenue. The other one is a simple receptacle where you would need some sort of intermediary CT monitoring if you're going to charge for that revenue for that receptacle. It's very common in residential where we're already the last 18 months, we have been installing a 40 amp receptacle circuit below the electrical panel in all of our single family dwellings. And people will just simply use their portable level 2, which is usually up to 60 amps portable, 60 amp rated, 50 amp continuous output. They will plug that into their 50 amp receptacle, NEMO receptacle outlet, and it'll be supplied with number 6 electrical wire. That's the minimum ampacity. And that whole inspection is done with Article 625.
Okay, and this is a great distinction because what I'm understanding then that's still category 1 in some interpretations because even though they're inspected differently from an EVSE versus that still fits that category 1 versus category 2 junction box with a cover.
Either if we have a energized receptacle that allows a portable level 2 to plug into it with the appropriate adapters. See, and the technology inside of the EVSE equipment, whether it's portable or hardwired, it can auto select based on your car. You can do it right with your app or your infotainment center. You can say, I know I am only limited to 16 or 24 amps on my equipment. I'm with it. And you can actually plug that into a larger receptacle and still meet code because the equipment has the ability to self-adjust.
Right. Okay. Learning a lot here. That was the best explanation I've had, at least. Thank you.
Yeah. And I've been, like I said, I've been in and out of the meetings. I appreciate what everybody's doing. Just, I'm the guy that's ultimately here, at least in my local jurisdiction. I inspect to what's required, nothing more, nothing less. And when a requirement of electrical is outside of 1928, other than a professional courtesy phone call to my local building official, I walk out whether that outlet's there or not. That's not my decision. I just ensure and I give a report to my building official. The outlet or the circuit that was installed for EVSE meets Article 625.
Okay. Appreciate that.
But
Jason.
I do appreciate the time and I appreciate the work everyone's doing.
Likewise. Thanks.
Okay. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Good. Thanks. Quinn.
Yeah, I really appreciate Jason's because I do sort of agree with what Jason was just saying. The way I see EV charger is almost the same way I would interpret EVSE is. To me, those two are kind of interchangeable. When I think of EV charger, I think Tesla, right? Those Tesla charging stations you see at Costco or at the mall or something like that. When I think of EV ready parking spaces, I think of just the outlets. Those are what we have at my condo. It's just the EV ready outlets. We don't have any of the Tesla charging stations, the actual big boxes. They're all outlets. So I just want to bring that up. But my main question is, Micah said earlier, like, was it my intention to combine the columns? And yes, I was hoping that Dustin staff can say, can we combine, the first, Patrick's proposal, and I don't know who the proponent was for the third one, because I feel like if we're going to decrease from one column, we need to increase it to another. And I feel like the third column is more for anticipation. I feel like that increase would be more sensible in my mind. And then whereas like Todd, you were alluding to, the middle column is the 15 would be a good baseline for the entire state. So that's it.
Some number would have to be established more relevant to current use or adoption. And I'm trying not to give too much recommendation here, but then what I'm hearing in this, I did not come into this meeting with this, we're learning a lot here. perhaps there is something that addresses more of the where we're going. And if you could, well, if you're willing to put that RCW back up, just so we can ground ourselves. I think we've seen the definition now.
Todd, can I jump back in and just clear up another
Please do. Yeah.
misnomer?
Yep.
The charger is in the vehicle. The battery management system is in the vehicle. The battery drives away with the vehicle. That device, EVSE receptacle, is just an electron pump. It takes 240 single phase or 208 three phase or 480 three phase AC. It pumps it through an inverter inside the car, and the inverter switches it back to a DC voltage to charge the DC cells. The other one is we do have DC chargers that are capable of bypassing the AC inverter to get rid of round trip line loss, more efficiency, and go directly to DC. It's the same thing when we talk about photovoltaics. There's two ways to couple photovoltaics with the energy grid. You can do a DC couple with your inverter to charge your batteries direct without AC transfer inverter line loss. You can also go and accept the line loss because efficiencies are very good, and you can bring AC right off of your array through what they call a micro inverter or a string inverter. It's user's choice and education, but the receptacle or the EVSE is nothing but an AC electron pump. And it's a little, and it also has a proc sensor to make sure the battery's cool, make sure the battery is charging correctly, make sure the input from that receptacle is not outside the spec of the battery management system. It's just an AC electron transfer system. It's as simple as that, unless it's in fact a DC fast charger, but it's back to the same principle. It just goes, it bypasses the car's onboard inverter and has a more direct DC to DC charging for fast charging and to eliminate that round trip loss of inverting AC to DC. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think we're hearing a lot and learning a lot on the distinctions within the electrical code and how that triggers certain inspection requirements, so forth, and then helps us frame and strip out everything that is only the requirement in the purview of the building code. So that is helpful. Okay, Micah, please.
I'm not a voting member of the TAG, but I'd like to make a motion to have Jason be appointed to the TAG for us. That's great information. Really appreciate it. And thanks, Quinn. That helps clear up what I thought your intent was, and I appreciate the information. And I should say that you all can see that the differing of opinion occurs. I work closely with Hoyt and Quinn, and they're friends of mine, and so and we still have different opinions. So it's something I think we definitely need to discuss and try to get right based on the RCW, and hopefully, again, maybe the proponents can give some additional calculations on anticipation so we can at least the TAG can get an appropriate recommendation, even if that recommendation also includes modifying the table to only have 2 columns. Thanks.
You know, Micah, and you say the proponent, but and maybe this is my opinion. I don't think it's only on the proponent at this point. I think we've brought it to the council. I think the council now has to own it with all the input from the public and the proponents and so forth. But you know, Quinn, you asked the question: Are we able to modify now and do, you know, some code writing and try to bring these together? In my opinion, yes. But I also look to staff to tell me why you know, maybe or the committee and why that interpretation might be wrong. I think that's what we're doing here. And I think we could entertain now some amendments to the amendments here.
So looking at all 3 of these, we've mainly been focusing on 068 and 135, which are 2 separate proposals affecting different sections of the same table. So if both of these were adopted by the council, it wouldn't combine the 2 proposals. We haven't been talking much about number 122. So if we're looking to maybe strike a column, I think that we may be empowered to do that, but I would maybe caution against doing that, since all these have been moved from the technical advisory group at this point.
So I don't obviously disagree, Dustin, but this comes up in the energy code. if not here, what when? I mean, when would we have this process in place on a 3-year cycle that we entertain external petitions? I shouldn't say entertain, we're petitioned to consider certain amendments, but we struggle with when do we actually do code writing and so forth in the process. So we do some in the tag, but now we're saying, can we do some now that the council and the committee own this
I
this
believe we are
responsibility?
allowed to do it. I just was,
Yeah.
since it has gone through the tag,
Okay.
just a little caution.
Okay. Thank you. Micah?
Thanks, Dustin. Yeah, I think the caution is warranted, but I definitely believe we can modify that table as long as we at least move that percentage or combine that percentage somewhere else. So we're, in my opinion, would not be significantly different from what's either existing or what's proposed. And I think that would be within line of the new rules based on the legislation from last year. Thanks.
Okay. Important discussion. Okay. I don't see any other hands, so good discussion. We'll keep it open for public comment, but let's move into the committee starting to deliberate on what action might want to be taken, and I see multiple pathways here, including recommending some additional work that we could bring back to the next BFRW committee meeting in 1 month. But I think we should give direction for that work. Go ahead, Katie. Okay, I think you're muted or I'm not. Yep.
Well, she's not muted, but your system's not set up to get it.
She's got a second mute button.
No,
somewhere.
I'm a mute. I'm a bit of a mess technologically today. So sorry about that. Thank you everyone for this. There's a lot to consider. And so I guess I'm just kind of wondering, just to get the procedure right, we're going to tinker around with these and try to get our best proposal forward, and we're going to put that forward. And
It's
or
up
or
to the
do
committee. Yep.
yeah, okay,
I
so
recommend that, but it's up to the committee. Yep.
okay, it's up to the committee. Okay, great. That's where I hope this conversation goes for sure. Thanks.
I'll weigh in, even though I'm chairing here. I'm on this committee. I'm a member. Well, first of all, again, thank you, everyone. This is exactly what I had hoped for, to have subject matter experts in addition to all of the work that was done at the TAG. So I think we did a good job of taking all that knowledge that was learned in the TAG and also having a further, adding additional information here of how to advise the council. That's really what we need to do here. There's a lot of things that were brought back in terms of how we would forecast this, and I know I can't remember, an RCW that might even dictate that we have to look at WSDOT values, and I think Patrick did a good job of bringing some of that information to the TAG, if I remember correctly. I advised then, and again now, that I'll do the work myself and try to bring something forward, that I think when we look at current adoption and then future adoption, I think we also have to ground ourselves in our power plan, our Northwest Power and Conservation Council power plan, which does an amazing regional job across the, better than I've seen across the country on looking at, statistically valid current adoption of these technologies and loads and so forth. And then also they're responsible for doing the future planning of how we're going to have that capacity, again, outside of the discussion here, but they have to forecast in order to determine that capacity. So I'll do additional work there, and hopefully others can too. I think the interesting questions here of whether this table, we want to stick with 3, or if we could restructure this a little bit to simplify it and say one is more about current adoption and one is about future adoption. But I haven't heard a lot of feedback on that from the committee. Does anyone have any comments? Or do you feel that we do need 3 categories and we just need to do a little bit of work to justify why that is critical? I think you have to answer that before you start looking at the numbers. 10, 15, 25 on those first 2 categories. 40, sorry. Okay. Anyone else from the public? People weigh in. We're not really in deliberation here. We're still discussing. So go ahead, Micah.
I think everybody's getting tired of hearing me talk, Todd.
Well, I think we're getting near the end here, so we'll wrap this up. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, since you opened it back up to the public, I mean, I would definitely like to see the work done where the tables may look at being combined, or maybe the analysis just needs to get done if the definitions of an EV ready and EV charging are similar enough to combine those two. And then, like Quinn mentioned, the EV capable is kind of the future anticipated number. So maybe there's a balance you find between combining the EV charging and ready spaces to a set percentage. Maybe that's a combined total of 25% across the board between those two, or a 35%. And then the EV capable be increased to capture that RCW of anticipated zero emission vehicle future. But I who do you want to do that evaluation? I mean, I can do some evaluation and come back and share my opinion, which I've probably already shared anyway, but I don't know, because it seems like the committee members need to provide some direction on what they would like to see, whether they direct that work out to others.
Yeah.
Helpful.
Well, regardless of who does the work, and everyone needs to be experts here, I guess I'm asking, how do you make a distinction between the 3 categories from a cost benefit approach? I'm having trouble between the first 2, pulling those apart from a cost benefit, because you're making the same, you have an almost identical cost, in my opinion, if I'm understanding this correctly. So how is the benefit of 1 versus 2? That's the thing I'm struggling with a little bit, and why my mind is starting to put those together, but just curious how others would approach that. So let's go to Patrick, please.
Yeah, Mike and I actually had a conversation, I think back in December near the end of the tag cycle, and he makes excellent points about issues with the code language, and then some other folks and builders and Jason have brought up further stuff. But at that juncture, I didn't feel like I could submit an amendment or a revision to try to do a more substantial change. My point of view is I think the current requirements are excessive, even if you assume much higher adoption over 25 years. And so I'm looking to get some kind of cost reduction and increased feasibility for multifamily buildings this cycle. If you want to try to get feedback from stakeholders, builders, folks like Jason, Micah, and improve the code language, I think that would be great. I'm always in favor of simplifying and making code language better. But I would like to see some sort of reduction in the minimum requirements, so that to try to help make housing, multifamily housing in particular, a little more affordable in the 2024 cycle. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, and I appreciate the warm welcome. Let me jump back in as a member of the public, an educated member of the public. Just a couple issues. If I was a building inspector, which I am not, but applying my same level of interpretation over 27 years working with the National Electrical Code, when I read the definition again, if I was a building official and I saw a 240 volt 50 amp or 40 amp receptacle in a weather tight mailbox, it would meet it would count as EV ready. That's just my interpretation. And as far as going back to Kurt, I inspect 4 or 5 retrofits weekly here in the Tri-Cities. Electrical contractors out here, we know what we're doing. A lot of time you can just cut a hole in the sheetrock below the panel, run your number 4, your number 6 gauge wire, Put it on a GFCI breaker if it's a receptacle, that's a code requirement, or if it's hardwired, the EVSE's already got the GFCI protection in. I take a look under the hood, make sure the wire gauge meets Article 650, make sure everything else is copacetic, and voila, I've got an EV ready receptacle below my panel for my portable. Now going out in the public, it's a little bit different. Multifamily, mercantile, whatnot. Again, the magic number, that's just, you're gonna have to pick something, and probably with the I know there's many ways, very many passionate ideas. I think the more conservative and then go higher and let the data run is the way to go. That's just from the public. But the other thing is the EV capable. You have an issue there with 1928. You say that it has to have capacity for the number of circuits. I have no requirement in the National Electrical Code to have that as part of my inspection process. In a single family dwelling, I have 5 circuits I have to have, and they all have a minimum volt amp. And I have a minimum lighting load. So there's things I can calculate out that has to be required before occupancy. I have no such requirement, commercial, industrial, or residential service or multifamily, to ensure I have X amount of capacity. Your building officials do not have the ability in my jurisdiction to come up with that math or enforce that. That enforcement is my department. So we have a conflict there. I don't have a requirement, he does, and the council has not provided what the number is. Is it 5%, 10%? Is it 20%? Now I do believe there's a compromise where you can run extra conduits out to your transformer, but then you're going to have to coordinate that with your transformer. That transformer by the public utility may already have multiple tenants that haven't been built yet, and it's already been assumed that the capacity is already maxed out. So we could have all the conduits in the ditch out to the vault, to the utility, but the incoming line may never support your increase for EV capable parking spaces. I just wanted to let you know that's a reality, the way the state is set up for electrical enforcement. Thank you.
Jason, though, just to clarify on something you said there, the EV capable are only tied to the number of parking spaces, not the existing circuits. That's a correct statement?
But the language says, and the electrical distribution, including all the way back to the utility transformer, where the service point is, where I start my inspection process, it says it has to have the capacity for those future. But I have no such requirement in the National Electrical Code book to allow for that, unlike some of the Article 210 tells me at least 5 minimum circuits are all single family dwellings have to have. So I have to account for all those loads. Okay, that's a given. I do not have to account for future expansion.
So you're saying right in front of us here, 429.3 at the end before the exception. That's what you're referring to there.
Well, could you read it for me just to make sure before I say
The
tongue in cheek?
The electrical service and electrical system, including any on-site distribution transformers, shall have sufficient capacity to simultaneously charge all EVs at the required EV charging stations, EV ready parking spaces, and EV capable parking spaces at a minimum.
Absolutely. And you're putting that onus on the building official who has no background.
Gotcha.
Okay. And you don't give us a number of what it has to be. 5%, 10%, 20%. So if I have a 600 amp service, which is very common for a 3-tenant multi-occupancy building, and you say each one of them has to have, let's just say 10 conduits in the ground. Okay, I have no compunction or no enforcement to say that, okay, if those are all going to be 40 amp loads, that I have to have another 400 amp service there. That's not going to, I have no way to communicate that or to enforce that. I don't legally, I just don't have the authority, nor do I want that authority.
So is the question here whether, and we've gone over this many times, and I remember this now, and I remember discussion about different services for parking sometimes versus the building, but here, I guess another question is should EV capable be included in in the requirements of the size of the transformer and service. Even
Well, it has to by that legislative mandate, it has to. But the problem is, you made that a requirement of 1927, not 1928.
Well, sorry, which statute are you talking about? That where it's required
That
capable?
statute 1927 that states and shall have the capacity, the EV readiness. The problem is it does not amend 1928, which is your installation requirements for all electrical installations in Washington State. So you've taken that onus and put it on to the building official who does not have the knowledge or skills or the ability to pencil that out.
Okay, we're all rereading this for the 18th time.
Yeah. 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 Nowhere in 5150 or in 1927, I have not seen anything over the last 3 code cycles amending that even mentions 1928.
Jason, can you verify for the tag that 1928 modifies the state electrical code?
Yeah, no, it is the state electrical code, and it adopts the NEC and the WAC 29646B. Those are the only 2 governing documents. And the follow-on low voltage and other. There's about 7 code books or international codes, but the hierarchy is 29646B. That's my highest level authority. That's the equivalent of your amendment process for your building codes. And then I got the NEC. And whatever one conflicts, I go to the highest authority in the hierarchy. It's very, very simple.
Okay. Okay. That's something to chew on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Okay. Kurt.
I just want to go back to the 3 categories. I think I heard that the comment that combining these, because they're similar costs. I don't think that's correct. I think each column has distinctly different costs associated with the requirements. I also think that we're not taking into account all of the costs, as has been alluded to here. So when you go all the way back, the practical implication here is that if there are EV capable parking spaces, I'm showing that as in my parking matrix. I'm showing it as depending on the jurisdiction and their level of understanding of the requirements. I'm showing it in my load calcs for the building, and that's where it stops. It does not go to the power supply or the power company because I'm not going to provide power for the what if, and there's nobody that's going to check that. So everything in that column puts us in the exact same spot that we're in today of retrofitting in the future because we haven't provided specificity to the need and the exact design criteria necessary. It's a what if, it's a futuristic thing that nobody's really paying attention to when it comes to the loads of the power and the needs. And so from a cost standpoint, each one of these categories has a different cost as it relates to getting power to the site, and then a different cost as it relates to the service size of what's needed for each building. And whether you're coming in with 3-phase and stepping down to single, I mean, all these things come into play on your service gear. And then you have your individual loads to a house panel or whatever may be feeding these chargers. But as the electrical inspector said earlier, on the EV capable, there's no circuit, there's no wire. It's just this can happen. Well, nobody in their right mind is going to assume all this additional expense as a developer is going to happen when nobody's actually regulating it, right? So the regulatory piece of it has to start at the infrastructure side of things, and you would have to assume that this is going to get done at whatever percentage you guys land on and build the infrastructure to support it as if it's being built today. That doesn't happen under the current process. And I find it hard to believe that it would happen in the future process if you change this percentage, because the power companies I work with are already freaking out. And I'm in a situation right now in a multifamily project where the power company is telling me, oh boy, do you have to plan for chargers? And I'm like, no, we're doing the same thing. We're doing the receptacle deal. And we'll have a circuit size for each building, one charger or one receptacle outlet, and they can plug in and have their own charging capabilities because of the limited use in this area. And so I've done the minimum. I haven't planned for the future, but already they have to go off-site, upsize transformers and existing infrastructure that's not even nearby. It's close to their distribution or their power substation, just to get to this part of town. And if they aren't planning for the capable parking stalls or this trajectory of an increasing percentage over time, my argument here is that we're speculating without certainty, and that we're asking that inevitably we design to 100% use of electric vehicles, and that every stall ultimately will have a charger. And then all this additional cost burden is not taking into consideration the alternatives that may come about in the future. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, even more important to look in hindsight relative to the existing thresholds and how we're tracking, and then look forward and make an adjustment as we see the trend happening retrospectively. So I think that falls in line with, if everybody's saying we currently exceed the requirements of the law, why do we have to take another step before we actually truth test everything relative to what's actually happening on the ground and the costs associated with it? And just one more thing on the costs, I think we need to take into account the cost of producing those parking stalls that are set aside, because you've heard a lot of testimony here of vacant stalls. Well, those are needed stalls when you're parking out a commercial project or a multifamily project in certain areas. And if those sit vacant because they can't be used, now we're having to overproduce stalls that sit vacant for a period of time. And structured parking, $30,000 a stall just to have the stall. Now you add the infrastructure for power, the charger, and all that on top of it. It's a bigger issue in structured parking than it is in parking lot type garden style apartments. Still, there's a cost for that stall to sit unused, and I don't think that's being captured in the context of the analysis or conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kurt. And I think I'll remind everyone, I think we're only dealing with our occupants here, but it's still relevant. So thank you. Okay, Micah.
I want to say thanks to Kurt and Jason for both reiterating what we've said all along here when these proposals started 3 or 4 years ago, was that the building code is not the correct location for this. However, I've said that all along when I was on the council representing code officials. Building officials, this is not their lane, if you want to put it that way. This is out of their lane. This is electrical. It's covered by L&I, or it's covered by individual jurisdictions, electrical inspectors or electrical programs, which I believe there's only about 35 in the state that are outside of the L&I jurisdiction. So with that said, however, I want to remind Jason and Kurt that we are tied, I'm not part of it anymore. I'm just on here running my mouth, that the SBCC is tied to the RCW that says they shall do this and it shall include these things. Kurt, what you mentioned about the capacity and not being identified, it's not being reviewed, that is an argument that has been made. However, that is the requirement of the RCW, that the capacity has to be there. Whether you're putting that in the calculation and whether somebody's actually inspecting it, maybe others, the building official's not capturing it, or L&I is not capturing it because it's not part of the electrical code requirements. That's kind of outside of where we have to look, or where the council has to look based on the RCW that they're guided or directed to produce this stuff and put it in there. So the capacity, when we look at this, you may not be saying it, or you may say, hey, we're not installing that, we're not capturing that necessarily, it's not being required. It's required by the RCW and it's required by the code language. It may not be being implemented in practice, but we're just tied by the RCW, so I think that's what we have to come back to. So the capacity is required. By definition, it's required when we go again back to the RCW or the WAC language for EV capable. The definition says electrical panel and load capacity to support the future. So it is a
I think in
requirement.
the RCW, Dustin, there you go. Sorry.
But,
Go ahead.
So,
Todd, can I jump in here too? There's another facet.
Yeah.
Again, we have to reconcile. It's called correlation. You guys do all the correlation. You guys are doing, it's amazing what your volunteers or what you guys are asked to do. And I respect that. But I can't tell the utility what wire size they can use or how large of a transformer they can use on their side of the service point. I have no jurisdiction. I can work with the engineer. I can ask questions. I can get their white book or red book installation. I can inspect to make sure my what I approve is also going to meet the PUD's requirements, because we do have some overlapping jurisdiction, but it's a very, very clear-cut line, and it's always about professional courtesy. Micah's right. That EV readiness does not belong in 1927. You can't enforce it. It does not impact. And going back to the capacity, I don't believe the council can tell the utility companies how large of a transformer they can set. Even if you give them the math and you give them the variables and you give them the numbers, I think they're going to tell you that you're out of your swim lane. And I'm not trying to be tongue in cheek, or I'm not trying to say this is a gotcha moment. I'm just telling you the reality is I have no power to enforce the EV readiness in 1927, and the building official doesn't have any power in my jurisdiction, which is 85% of the state of Washington, to tell me how to enforce 1928. But we locally here, we're professionals. We care about the community. We have these conversations, and we come to the best agreement we can come to. I just want to make sure that there's three entities. You got the utilities, you've got L&I electrical, and you've got 19.27 and the building official. And then you got the legislative body that doesn't understand that an amendment to one RCW can have a cascading effect on hundreds of other RCWs. Well, that's hyperbole, but many other RCWs. And they're not doing the recollection at legislation session time. That's where the executive council, which I commend, and the legislative council need to start partnering with the legislative body, because of how your process, your APA is tied to the legislative. I had the same process too. We amend the WAC and the RCW. There's always amendments in every 3-year cycle, and I have to learn what's new and what's been relaxed, or what requirements have been made more stringent. And then I educate my local electrical contractors, and we go on our merry way to the next 3-year code cycle. Okay, I just want to make sure there's 4 entities here that are not on the same page in my public opinion. And this testimony is Jason Armstrong, licensed electrical journeyman who does work for the state of Washington, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the department or representing the electrical chief in any way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, Quinn.
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack here. So I'll try to be quick about it. First thing, the way, and this is just my opinion on it, the way I see 1927 along with 1928. 1927 is authority given to the building official on what to require. 1928, which is the electrical stuff, would be how it's required, how to implement what the building official says. So the building official says, we want 40 amp right here, right? We want it. Then the electrical folks could then come back, like Jason would go, okay, this is how you get it. This is what I'm going to expect. This is how you're going to achieve it. But again, Jason is right that he's not going to require them to provide it. That's the building official. We're requiring it. Jason's then going to come back and say, this is how we get it. Okay. So that's one thing. The other thing about Kurt's comment that jurisdictions are not reviewing it or inspecting it. I can't speak for other jurisdictions. This is where the argument of consistency between jurisdictions go. Tacoma, we review, we ask for it, we inspect for it, but I can't speak for other jurisdictions, right? And then if you go back to the columns, the tables, one thing I'm neutral on this, but to be careful when you're combining it, there are no requirements for group R on the first column, but there are on the second. So be careful when you're combining it that you're not including things that would have been exempt are now exempt. You see where I'm going? Yeah. So just be
It's a
aware of
good
that.
point. If there's an effort to do that, maybe it's more bringing the bottom two rows in alignment with some basis of current demand and cost benefit, and then a different consider. That's a good point, Quinn. I'll make a comment we'll try to wrap this up, but you know, you made this point many times, Mike, and I appreciate that Jason's kind of reinforcing it, that maybe there's a better balance between the electrical code and the building code. I always interpreted the building code, though, as those infrastructure requirements that are more related to, because it's also related to parking. I know we have the same challenge when we deal with solar readiness. It's like it's part of the structure of the building, and where does it belong, if not in the building code, to at least make the requirement and then appropriately address it in the other codes for the specifics. I know we're learning, probably 5 times as much as we need to know about the electrical side of this. And that's why we struggle because we're experts in the building code, but it's valuable in order to then pull this apart and say, this part belongs in the building code, in my opinion, because it's related to parking, because it's related to infrastructure like conduit. Is the cost benefit of putting a raceway in upfront as required here appropriate in the building code, because the cost benefit of doing now is far better than the cost benefit of doing a retrofit. But that doesn't mean maybe there should be all of the supply and other, infrastructure in place. So it's a question, not a statement, but okay, Micah.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Jason and Quinn and everyone. This is a tough one. I know we got a lot of work on this still for the next month. And I know we probably need to stay as narrowly focused as possible, but Jason sure mentioned an elephant in the room of the utility side of it that we can't influence. There's nothing in the RCW that says we can. And unfortunately, we can say, hey, we want all this capacity and want all this infrastructure, but the utility does have the authority to say, this is all the capacity we can provide you at any given spot. That happens on a regular basis. That's great that we can provide all these calculations, but Jason is making fabulous points. I'm sure he's talking with Lauren Lathrop, who's the LNI rep on ex officio rep on SBCC on some of these things. If not, I highly encourage that. But it's a problem. We can have this on the building code side, even the electrical code side, but the utility folks, you're still only going to get what they can provide you. And if they can't meet this requirement, you're not going to get there anyway. So I honestly, this is way beyond the scope of where we're at today, but the legislation is what needs to be modified. And coordination across 1928, 1927, and even land use codes, which is 3670B RCW, probably needs to be appropriately coordinated for EV parking spaces and infrastructure in the future, but that's not where we're at today. So lots of work to come on this. Thanks.
Good comment, Kurt.
Real quick to that point, is it your opinion, Todd, that the committee has to act on the proposals as presented, or can the committee take action and say that these proposals have raised a number of issues and potential conflicts that exacerbate either the interpretation problems or the implementation issues or inconsistencies, or however you want to frame it, and kind of highlight the fact that this in-depth conversation is happening, and that maybe as a signal to the legislature, hey, we need some legislative fixes or guidance because of what has been created based on legislative intent and actually the resulting rulemaking that is evidencing these conflicts of interpretation and potentially putting the committee in a position to do something that may cause unintended consequences. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Kurt, and I'll also leave it and open it up to the committee. But my opinion is this is an opportunity. Okay, now we're talking about this. I really appreciate that everyone. This is the public process. I think we had hoped for, and now the opportunity is we can try to do our best within our current authority and rulemaking process to improve this if there's if we feel we can. But to your point, I do feel we're establishing a better relationship with the legislature on being able to approach them and make specific recommendations, how to improve some of the things that are in statute that are inhibiting us from moving forward. Respecting and understanding their intent, just helping to be part of the process to maybe improve that also. So as everyone knows, this is a long process, right? And we go back and forth between policy and rulemaking and so forth. And let's just establish what we can do this cycle to improve this if appropriate. So with that, let's start to wrap this up. I think to the committee, does anyone have a recommendation? Sounds like we want to take this month to seek input, continue the process. If we do that, my recommendation would come with a firm proposal next meeting that is published, and that the process of that happening can be a little dynamic. Let's Dustin, if you're okay, if we submit feedback to and even propose code language to the SBC email, and we can get those posted, and then try to staff and council try to bring those together to something we can talk about next committee meeting. I think this serves as the glorified hearing that we wanted. Let's not do 2 hours again next time, but let's actually look at something specific and if we can get to a recommendation, that's great. But know that we also do have a little time before the CR 102 gets submitted. Dustin, do you disagree with any of that?
No, sir, I do not. And so if we get proposals into the SBCC mailbox, I'd be happy to publish them. And if there's need to combine anything like that, work with people who are submitting anything to kind of bring a concise package to the next meeting.
Okay. And we'll have some proposals are just feedback. I mean, we've had a lot of great verbal feedback here, but let's put things on paper here and actually strike some things out in kind of code language, if possible, please. Patrick.
Are you asking for new petitions for this section, or are you asking for amendments to the?
Not formal petitions. We're trying to blend these together now. So let's use this opportunity and not get over our skis on getting too outside the bounds of the intent of these petitions, right? We've kind of established that. We're not trying to, it's not an opportunity for new petitions. It's trying to now understand the intent of these and also some of these other considerations that we have to try to bring together, the RCWs and so forth that we've talked about today. Is that a good approach?
Todd, would it make sense to ask specific questions about, like, that we would like answered, like whether or not we should combine two of the columns and what percentages we're talking about as referred to in the proposals, so that we get the things that we want?
I think so, Katie. I think we better give direction is what you're asking, right?
Yeah. Okay, that would be my suggestion.
So I think you said one there. Let's put that on the table. Whether they can combine, or I think Quinn made a good point. We have to be careful how we do that, but really we're talking about that bottom row on these two. We're not, the scope of these petitions, in my opinion, is the bottom row. And so really we're looking at, is there a way on those first two columns on the bottom row to bring those together, but more importantly, do a cost benefit analysis, do forecasting and so forth. Like that's what we need. We need criteria and actual, justification for the recommendation to the council. Lots of people can give political opinions, but we need something to ground this in that's defensible. Go ahead, Patrick.
Is the committee going to be doing that work?
I'm asking for as much help from the public as possible for the input, but then we're going to try to bring that together and put something on paper for next meeting.
Because my perspective as a proponent is some of those things you asked for is quite a bit of work. There's an active submittal window for the 2021 energy code that our organization is planning on submitting a number of proposals for. And then we're having to prepare for the 2024 energy code that's going to have a submittal window probably opened up next week. And then we have the residential code coming up. So there's a lot going on right now.
That's an understatement. Thank you, Patrick. I wasn't trying to be critical there. Go ahead, Micah.
I'll be happy to help the best we can. Again, we're similar idea to Patrick. There's a lot of windows that are limited. On top of that, they just dropped the 2,600 page ICC Group 2 monograph that we have to review in the next 6 weeks because I'm on the IBC General Committee for that as well. So lots going on, but we'll be happy to help. And then before we jump off, I really need to get going myself. On the question for the stair pressurization item, I believe the proposal that was in question for me was about the capturing of NFPA 70. I believe there was some coordination that occurred with Eric Vandermeer's proposal, the GP 114. If that one went through as shown on the document list, I think what was concerning in ours is captured in that with that coordination. So I'm not sure that anything has to be done with that proposal that Quinn kind of mentioned I may have an input on earlier. Thanks.
Yeah, just skipping out of there. I think the ask, Micah, was Eric wasn't here today, and maybe there was a direct ask. And you and Eric, you know, if it's you getting together and actually coming forward next meeting with, here's the recommendation between those two proposals. We just were at a standstill without more feedback.
Okay, no worries.
Angela,
I'll get a hold of Eric and ask. He's on our construction code advisory board as well for Seattle. So,
Angela, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think one of the other questions for Micah was what was going on with like option C or whatever that was being eliminated. Why was that gone? There was a question on that.
all right, thanks, Angela. I'll work with Rich and Eric on it.
I think that's what we're trying to do is get these down to something we can look at next meeting and say,
okay,
that's the recommendation.
We'll work on it. Apologize for being late. I was in a meeting with a council member.
Good, thank you.
Myself, other meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Micah. So, okay, back to the committee. Now, is that are we framing this correctly? Do we have other questions? I think we have an understanding of this, and we'll do as much work as we can with staff and the council to also put this down. But I think we understand it better. Committee, do you want to make a formal motion to table this with that expectation that we're asking for extra code language and we'll bring it back to next meeting?
A quick question for you on the combining of the number of EV charging stations and the number of EV ready parking spaces. I think if we did that, from what I'm seeing, is going to cause a lot more headache than it would solve. I think it would add even more confusion to this very confusing item.
Yep.
Just my opinion on that one.
Taking the full columns and bringing them together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus just trying to have more alignment of those two justifications, those numbers on those bottom two.
Yeah.
Left. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, where we're at now is basically just the three highlighted things here.
Yeah.
Are we going to go with the 40% or the 15 or neither? Right. And then the 10% to the 25, or do we do 15 and 25 or 40 and 25? I mean, yeah, a lot to think about on all this. Yeah. But I think we need to get to a little bit more work and then come back next month.
Okay. And then the question I would maybe pile on here is on, that was raised was 429.3. Is that correct? Yeah, whether or not EV capable parking spaces is appropriate there. So in the bottom line of what's highlighted there. Or is that creating an unnecessary, if our cost benefit analysis is really about, is that adding a lot of cost that's not necessary for future proofing?
Yeah, I think it does. But then at the same time, I think there was some great discussion on what is the capability of the provider. You know, that's putting a huge task onto them and onto, like you were saying, building officials to come up with that. I mean, it's one thing to throw conduit in the ground, you know, that's a minimal cost as opposed to adding the sufficient capacity. That's going to be a huge cost. And is it even an option with the power company?
Yeah, I think that anticipation question is
yeah, and then we go back to that. What do we anticipate?
Yeah,
I think we need some more numbers on that.
Okay.
So I guess what you're looking, is that what you're looking for? Is we're just gonna put a motion just to table this till next time, but we need some work done, but we need to, I guess, how do we phrase that?
Yeah, well, I think I think the motion could be as simple as we're tabling this for next meeting with recommendations based off of the public input and discussion today. I hope that's enough because this was pretty thorough, but
yeah, I worry that, would that mean that people would, to get the recommendation, they'd have to watch the whole meeting? So, as riveting as this is.
It's a good question. I don't know how to simplify this. That's a good question. Go ahead, Damon.
Thank you, Todd. Is one of the options to do nothing?
Yes.
As Mike had pointed out. Okay, I just didn't.
Also per Patrick's recommendation, push all three forward to CR 1 and 2.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And the option we're talking about here is a blended. Let's bring this to one recommendation we can consider next meeting. Okay. Okay, Dan, is that the motion then?
Table? I'm still confused. Yeah, I think just tabling motion is just to table this till next meeting and with some work done by staff to consolidate, I guess. Is that the proper way of saying it?
Yeah, and more written input.
And more written input. Okay, that's my motion.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I think we learned a lot. Thank you, everyone. On the agenda, we do have other business on there. Is there any other business for the committee? Or do we, before we get to that, did we sufficiently address? I think we did. The NFPA question, right?
Yeah, because the motion was to either.
Oh, I'm sorry, steering close. Yeah.
Was to table it, wasn't it?
Yep. So nothing
later
changing.
on, or later on, if we got the people, or to next time. So I think we're
good.
fine with next time.
Okay, so we are on to other business. Is there anything else before the committee? Okay, hearing none. Thank you all for your time. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Yeah.
Thanks, you too.